Oh my god, you mean it's a collaboration between content creators on a tier list? Can we get any more clickbaity than that? I don't think so. We have a great guest for this, and of course, it is a class overview tier list for Dark Deity 2. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel. And here we are. Of course, I have a wonderful guest here who I'll introduce in just a moment. You probably know him. He's been in the game longer than me, and I've been following his work for a long time, so it's a pleasure to have him. And if you enjoy this video, then I highly recommend that you go on over to his channel. It is Link King 7, of course. We have a little bit of a collab dual video thing going on here. I am breaking down the classes with him and ranking them, and then he has a video with me breaking down and ranking all of the characters for Dark Deity 2 on his channel. They should be up at the exact same time, so if you're watching this one now, you can watch that one next, or vice versa. It makes no difference to me. And if you enjoy what we do, of course, you should subscribe to both of us, because we would very much appreciate it. With that said, Link King, how you doing, sir? Very, very much a pleasure to have you here. Very excited to continue working with you.
Dude, that was an amazing intro. Like, now that makes my intro put to shame. I mean, you did so well. But yeah, super excited to work with you on these. I think when I reached out initially, I was like, I don't think there's a more perfect person to work with on this kind of stuff. Because like I mentioned in the last video, we kind of think the same way and break things down in a similar way, but with just enough differences to put a different spin on it. So I love that we're getting this collab in, and I hope we continue to do that in the future and that people enjoy the content that we're making.
Yeah, absolutely. Fingers crossed on that last bit for sure. I told you before we started recording earlier today that I've really never done any collabs with fellow creators. I've had people on streams and for videos to discuss things, but they've all either just been like close friends or people I know on the internet who are like artists and things like that. But it's a different beast entirely to be working with someone who actually does what I do in the same genre, covering the same games. It's very exciting, and it's a shame that I didn't start doing it before, but thank you for asking because I'm loving it.
Well, yeah, hey, there's a first time for everything, and I'm just glad that you agreed to it. It's been fun.
Hell yeah, absolutely. So, of course, as people should be quite familiar with by now, we are doing some tier lists. I've done plenty on my channel. I believe you've done plenty on your channel as well. It's a fairly common thing, and we have a lot of classes to break down here. So things are going to go through pretty linearly. I believe I've got everything set up in a pretty direct fashion. All of the classes set up according to their overall class tree. And we're going to go through and talk about both the Tier 2 and Tier 3 classes because each one does have something different that it brings to the table. And with the ability to cross-class and get kind of different builds and setups going on, they should, I think, kind of be judged on their own merits because they do definitely bring different stuff to the table. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, cool. We are going to get right into it. Is there anything, any groundwork, any rules, anything that you feel we should lay out here before we just jump right into the first class linking? What do you think?
I think you touched on everything. I think the most important thing is that tier lists generally age pretty poorly as the metas of games develop. So this is more so an activity of an early release. Game's been out for a week. We got to play it a little bit early. We don't have quite the tech that will develop in a couple of months. So take our words with a grain of salt. And we are usually trying to, like you said, take these in a vacuum of the class specifically, as opposed to how it coordinates with the character itself.
Correct, correct. You'll see, of course, I had to pick someone to represent each class, so like there'll be given characters here, but I actually kind of went out of my way to select characters for some of them that maybe don't actually fit the role of the class perfectly well, just to get a little bit of variety going on. And yes, as you said, we'll probably wind up revisiting these down the line because we are still very much inexperienced ourselves. This is kind of like an initial take kind of thing. We're both working on demonic playthroughs right now, and we'll probably have very different opinions by the time we get to the end of those. So we'll have to look back on this fondly and be like, oh, what idiots we were. How could we have possibly thought that this was a good class?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's all about the learning and sharing experience. So, we'll take it from here. It's a week 1 tier list, which is usually not a good idea, but it's fun. So we're going to do it anyways.
And it gives people the chance to yell at us, which, I mean, if you're not there to be yelled at on the internet, what are you even doing content for? Am I right?
I mean, yeah, I would actually not say it's completely being yelled at. It's for them to show us perspectives that we hadn't seen before. That's what I love about my comment section, at least. And I'm sure yours comes up with the same thing, is that they'll give you perspectives that you wouldn't have considered. And you're like, oh, well, actually, I want to try that in my playthrough. That seems fun.
Sorry, did you say, well, actually? Awfully close to, actually, sir. You better be careful with your verbiage.
You gotta sneak it in, but I said it in a positive way.
You did. That's true. And, intent matters. So, all right. Enough stalling, though. We have a lot of classes to get through here, and we are both busy gentlemen. So, let's jump right into it with Devout. So, Devout is definitely an interesting one. Right off the bat, it's not the sort of default first promotion that I would think of for what I'm calling the warrior class tree, but it definitely is a fun one, and that's something I've always liked about Dark Deity is the variety of like weapon types and designs that it does. But as a class, how do you feel about it? Because I feel like it's pretty middle of the road. I don't know if it's B or high C. What are your thoughts?
I'm gonna come out guns blazing, and I'm gonna say D tier for Devoted. Honestly, I think this class is one of the worst classes in the game.
Wow.
Executioner, the personal skill, stacking 8 crit per status effect on target up to 32. It works okay with axes and tries to one-shot, but more often than not, the people in this class will not be one-shotting because its strength growth is low, doesn't really support it. The type of units that can access this class aren't really good. It provides some utility with Spinning Blade and Light Block and Hemorrhage and Heavy Bleed, but it's just a very confused class. It doesn't do one thing particularly well. The growths are kind of spread out all over the place with a focus on mastery and luck. And the Light Block is nice, but if all you're going for is a buffer, then I suppose this works. But there's another class in this tree that's just simply better than that at doing that, and that's Nightblade or Seeker. So I do not like this class, and I think it's potentially one of the worst, if not the worst class in the game.
Very, very strong words to start with from Mr. King himself. I'm gonna have to pump the brakes a little bit there. I feel like there's some merits to this one, but definitely on the lower end. So for my perspective on it, what I like about Devout is that it's a solid basis to work off of for other classes in the tree for certain things. So I think, yes, it does definitely have mixed growths, and it kind of has mixed roles that it wants to play into. But I think that's because, more than anything, it wants to help you build into other options, right? So, like, if you want to go into Champion, I personally don't think that Gallant is very good. I would rate Gallant lower than Devout. We'll get to that. But I like the idea of being able to have a block ability and a bleed ability to put on your champion. I think that definitely rounds that class out better. Now, of course, we're taking each class in a little bit of a vacuum, but part of that ranking is going to be what it contributes to things that you can build it into. And I do think there are some solid abilities here, even if as a complete package, it is a little bit mixed. So I agree with you. It's not phenomenal at all. I do enjoy it. It is fun to use, but it's not going to be great. I would argue if you want D, I would say bottom of C for now. And we can always adjust, but I think it does have enough merits to not be in D.
I'd be willing to split the difference on this one.
Okay.
But I do think it is one of the more bottom tier classes in this game for sure.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. I do think there's stuff that's worse than it. And maybe you have a vision of a more fleshed out D tier, a fatter bottom, if you will, for this tier list. But I definitely have a few that I think are far worse than Devout. So we'll go with C for now, and we'll see if we wind up adjusting.
Interesting.
Now, very different change of pace here for the tier 3 version of Devout with Reaper. I personally think Reaper is pretty damn good. I don't know about you, but the ability that Reaper has to just teleport around the battlefield, to be a decently bulky, high damage crit machine, really can't be overstated. I took Gwyn through Gallant into Reaper for my initial run on Deity, and it felt pretty damn good. I probably would have gone with something else as her base class rather than Gallant, just because I don't like the push ability, but just having that opportunity to jump basically wherever I want on the field and just nothing personal kid someone was pretty damn good. But what do you think? So I'm thinking probably B at least.
Oh, I love this class.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
I think that in terms of a specific role that it seeks to fulfill, it does an excellent job. This is your bread and butter high crit class. You want to do your critical hits so that you can proc the personal skill Visage of Death and get 100% additional damage. So your crits aren't doing 2 times damage anymore. They're doing 3 times damage.
Back to FE crits. Let's go.
Yeah. And the growths support that. It jumps to a 25% might growth, which isn't the highest in the game, but it's good enough, and it has a 35% luck growth as well. So it is supporting those important things for damage and for crit. And it also, in addition to that, has Reaper's Mark, which grants an ally X amount of crit for 1 turn scaling on mastery, which it has a high mastery growth. But with the ability enhancements, it also gives you the opportunity to self-cast. And so now you already have that high percent crit rate. You've got the self-casting to boost it even further, and you have access to axes. And axes have some of the highest stacking crit potentials in the game. I think some of the end game ones have the ability to get 20% crit when enemies are full HP, and also 15% crit. And that'll be better than any other upgrade you can give it, because the axes are heavy. You don't need to double if you're one-shotting straight up.
Yep.
And in addition to that, you can just blink and go and rip apart an enemy halfway across the map. I went with Valeria was my Reaper.
Okay.
And I went Nightblade into Reaper. And so the poison also does help a little bit sometimes. So you really have just the sort of, a debuff / self buff that doesn't really rely on damage skills. It just relies on personal damage output itself. Now, I don't know how well this will work in Demonic, though, because the enemy's defenses scale so highly. And so you might honestly end up needing that Gallant personal skill Honorclad that gives you an extra 5% damage as flat, because tripling that 5% is 15 when you crit.
Yeah.
It's a pretty significant power swing or damage potential swing there. So I don't think we should underrate Gallant into Reaper. I think that's actually a very good transition. Even if you don't use the Overpower or the Call to Arms, actually Call to Arms could be really good here because it's just giving you extra power as well.
Yes.
So I don't think you can go wrong with either of them, Nightblade for debuffing or Gallant for buffing yourself. But I think Reaper is honestly, I wouldn't even say B tier. I think it's potentially in an A tier class because of the damage potential that it can do.
Okay. I'm definitely down for that. And of all of the different potential, like physical kind of DPS options, Reaper is definitely like really solid. I'm also a little biased because like I just love scythes, edgy things like that is super cool. The blink really can't be overstated. That is such an absolutely nutty ability. Like the first time I saw Reaper, I was like, what do you mean I can just teleport? I can just warp staff myself? Okay, let's go. So, yeah, I'm perfectly happy putting it in A tier if you're comfortable with that. I was lowballing it, but yeah, I love this class. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely go for A tier. And I mean, an additional thing for Blink is not only is it good for combat utility, if you need to, in a pinch, just finish an objective or get one of those points for like some of the sub-objectives, Blink easily lets you do that. And so it's also a utility class for fulfilling the sub-objectives and even the main objective too. So I don't think you can go wrong with A tier for this one.
Awesome. I mean, I completely agree with that. So, cool. Ship it. Let's go. Moving on to the sort of more roguish warrior aspect, we do have Nightblade, as has already been mentioned. So, I like Nightblade. I think Nightblade is pretty good. What are your thoughts on the overall kit for Nightblade? Because I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah, I think Nightblade is pretty good, and you kind of schooled me on this in our previous tier list as to what Nightblade wants to do on Demonic, because I was kind of struggling with it. I thought it was great in Deity, but on Demonic, it struggles to do any sort of damage. The might growth is very low, it doesn't have any guaranteed damage skills, and the poison stacks in the early game are on the low ball end, so you're not really debuffing that much when you're comparing the massive scaling that the enemies do have on Deity. So like 3 or 4 stats is a drop in the bucket when they've got 30 power at like chapter 10. It's not that much lower. So, but I think in terms of utility with Fleet Feet and Shadow Step with the dodge stacking, it can be a pretty good class. It's just where do you go from here with it? I think if we're talking middle of the pack, I think it's probably B tier.
Yeah, I would say so. My opinion of Nightblade is very much carried by Valeria being a pretty powerhouse unit early on in the game. And yeah, even if, like you're saying, she's not able to deal as much damage, just having knives, having all the different debuffs that you can stack on them with runes, the potential to get some crits out there, the utility, again, that Valeria has of being able to heal or buff speed or poison things, definitely bumps the class, in my opinion, a little bit. But just looking at it on its own, being able to put poison on stuff is nice, and it can be the difference maker between killing something and not, which can be massively important, especially on Demonic. But really, like, the utility of Fleet Feet can't be understated. Just having it so that your tank isn't getting doubled constantly could be the thing that makes or breaks your line. So I think for that alone, it is a very solid choice, especially in the early game. I'm perfectly comfortable with it being in B tier because of the whole poison scaling thing that you highlighted. I hadn't really thought about that, but that's definitely a very good point. So B sounds good to me. All right. Now, if I'm pronouncing this right, it's Encourant, right?
That's how I say it.
Yeah, all right, I think so too. The awesome dual blade, definitely not ripped straightly from Illidan in World of Warcraft design, which is just so absolutely sick. I really, really like Encourant. I love the fact that you can actually just huck a glaive at things for some ranged damage is very, very nice. And then, what is it? It's like the 3x3. Is it vulnerability that you can put on with yeah. Oh my God, so good. Because like we were just talking about how being able to do things like put vulnerable on knives with Nightblade that's going to be attacking very often is a really nice choice. So even though it's pricey, just being able to say, you know, whoa, moon be upon ye to a potentially ball of 9 enemies is so strong because it's going to make your whole rest of your team deal so much more damage. And then just having a little bit more damage on its own, being a little bit dodgier, I really like Encourant. Again, I can't speak to it on Demonic, but I have had nothing but good times with this class on Deity, and I'm definitely going to be trying it out on Demonic. So I don't know if you've had the chance to use it on Demonic at all yet. I don't think you've hit tier 3 yet, right?
No, not yet. But
Okay.
from just a pure like analyzing numbers perspective, I think there's a very nice piece of design that was done with Encourant. And I think the only thing it suffers from is actually lack of mana. Some of the Nightblade skills going into Encourant help circumvent that because you can get their mana costs further down. But Moonlight Beacon is an 80 mana cost skill. And I think if you're able to get it below 70, that's kind of that sweet spot where you can activate Midnight Ride with one cast of Moonlight Beacon to give you that 25 dodge, get your mana below 35, and stack up the heavy vulnerable to a ton of units. Like, I'm looking at it here on my screen. It says 14 heavy vulnerable to 12 enemies in a 3x3 zone. I mean, that's more enemies than can actually fit in the 3x3 zone to begin with.
I was going to say, wait a second.
I know, it's pretty funny. And so I actually really like the design of it. And I think Glaive Toss is excellent because the fact that the distance scales with your mastery means you can throw it for guaranteed damage, which is really good in Dark Deity too, like very far away. And it's actually a significant amount of guaranteed damage. Like I'm seeing 61 here, but it's like 12 plus 110% of your mastery, which is by the end game or by the time you get into this class, very, very good. So I think this is an excellent, just sort of specialized but also all-round class that will be consistent. And for that, I would probably also put it in A. I don't think it's quite S tier, but I think it's maybe a little bit below Reaper just because of how strong Reaper can be on its own. But I think this one is up there too.
I can agree with that. I definitely think it's A tier for sure. It's kind of a recurring theme, actually, now that I think about it. A lot of the tier 2 warrior classes are a little bit middling, but then you get to the tier 3 versions to get a nice power bump. And I think Encourant definitely suits that as well, for sure. It can do a lot of stuff, and it's versatile, which is really, really nice. Next up, we have Seeker. And now this is one I actually had not used at all during my Deity run. I have only started using it now on Demonic with my Gwyn, but my eyes have been opened to the Seeker. Man, Seeker is pretty nice. So I have kind of been thinking about Seeker in comparison to the other like rogue quote-unquote class tree archers, and it's definitely like the big single target, like single shot damage versus like multiple shot damage, right? And having the ability to not only give accuracy to your allies if you have someone who's maybe a little bit less accurate and needs a little bit of help to hit the enemy, but also the ability to stack extra damage on your attacks for yourself while also putting vulnerability on things is such a nice level of utility, combined with the fact that generally you're going to have pretty damn good might. So even if you're not doubling with this class, you're still going to hit hard. And as sort of like a marking your target type of class is a great way to soften up a priority target for another character to come in and do a bunch of damage. So I really like Seeker. I think I honestly, having, used all 3 of these first like tier 2 warrior classes in Demonic thus far, it's definitely the one that's performed the best for me. So I would be inclined to put it in A personally, but I'm curious to hear what you think for sure.
Yeah, honestly, on my initial playthrough, I didn't use it at all either. But when you go back and you look at it and you analyze it, a lot of the positive things we talk about for these classes are things that guarantee you damage or guarantee
Mm-hmm.
you consistency. And that enchant weapon ability is just so good. Like I clicked over into Benji right now in my game and it says 6 additional damage for the next 3 attacks with Benji, who has terrible mastery. And
Yeah.
this is going to increase the deeper you are in your mastery. So for example, my end game Gwyn would do 11 extra damage or maybe even more.
Yeah.
And it's 3 attacks. I think I saw up to 15 at one point when I was enhancing it. So I mean, regardless, it very quickly scales up to give you that extra guaranteed level of damage with an already pretty high might growth for a tier 2 class. It's got 25%, and that only increases when you go into Elisant if you wish to do so. Its dex and mastery are also high, so the scaling of these will go up exponentially as you start to, progress further through this class tree. So I actually agree. I think Seeker in the early game is invaluable because it allows you to stack on damage and heavy vulnerable, which lets your other allies also stack on extra damage. So the facilitation of the damage stacking and the guarantees of that damage is very important. I know I said damage like 100 times in the last 2 minutes, but
I mean, we're in the warrior class. Damage is kind of what they do, right? So it makes sense.
yeah, I think A tier is a very good spot for it because in the early game it's pretty clutch.
And even beyond the early game, those skills are still going to be really applicable in the late game. Like, you're always going to want to be able to pop enchant weapon. You're always going to be happy if you are having a hard time hitting something, just giving accuracy to a key character. You're always going to be happy just making an enemy vulnerable. Like, those are skills that are never going to fall off in utility. So that's pretty great for something you can spec into as early as you can with Seeker. So very much agree.
Yeah.
Now, you want to take Elisant here, because there's definitely some interesting stuff to discuss with this one. I'm definitely a fan of this one, for sure.
I love Elisant. I think Elisant is one of the better classes in the game. It is so specialized and so good at what it does. I mean, it has that high might growth of 30%. It knows that it's not a fast class and keeps the speed down. It's got the high dex and the high mastery for the abilities and the high crit and the high accuracy. And in addition to that, it has full draw. I mean, what is not to like about full draw? Full draw, I think, at its base, starts at like 5 to 6 tiles, and then you can increase the range even more with one of its ability enhancements, and then you can increase the tiles mastery scaling by another 10%. My full draw on my Gwyn targets 11 tiles away. We were talking about how far and how away Blink is. Full draw is almost the same distance. You are just like destroying things from halfway across the map. You can have an army of 4 Elisants and do pretty nice damage. And in addition to that, if you pair the weapons for it with full draw, you can get that. I forget what exactly it's called. I would have to look at it, the skill for the weapon. I think it's Ferocity, where you attack twice at 60% damage.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And so your full draw will attack twice. It won't just attack once at 60% damage. So you're getting 120% of what your original damage would be from halfway across the map. And you're applying Heavy Blind, which decreases the enemy's hit. So by the time they get to you, if you didn't kill them, they're not going to hit you. So I love this class. I think it gets held back a little bit by the types of units that can go into it and them not having the exact oomph to really make use of it. But I think pairing it with, classes that help, and the high mana cost is also a thing for full draw. I don't think you can actually decrease the mana cost, so you're stuck with that 50. So after you use it once or twice, you're not really going to use it. So it's not consistently there for the entire chapter.
Yeah, if you really want to maximize that, you need to be leaning on like a Scholar, Lore Master, Mana Battery or something like that. But
yeah,
I mean, even so, though, just having from that range, that level of damage output, that is pretty nasty. And you can crit on that too, can't you? It literally just lets you attack from really far away.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so, and it's going to put not just blind, but vulnerable on stuff too. So, like, I mean, how can you say no to that? You're just dropping a lightning bolt from Zeus on somebody. It's just be like, deal with it, scrub. So I think it's an easy A tier. The classic Fire Emblem discussion. It has no enemy phase, right? It's a bow class. Yeah, so okay. Maybe that drags it down a little bit, but I think like top of A is an easy pick for this, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it can probably potentially creep into S tier, but let's see how this list formulates. But I agree, just from like the utility and the consistency of it, it has no enemy phase, but you're hitting from so far away that who cares? Like,
yeah.
Nothing is going to be enemy phasing you.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, you don't need to be anywhere near the enemy to be hitting them. So yeah, no, that's fair. That is fair. All right, moving into the last of the four for the warrior tree, we have Gallant followed by Champion. So apparently you're maybe a bit higher on Gallant than I am. I like Gallant for the banner, honestly. I've gotten a lot of use out of Gallant Benji on Demonic, just running up and planting a banner and then letting everyone else run past him and actually do the dirty work. But that damage boost is nice, and it's a big area, and you can spam it pretty decently. Like, it's not the cheapest skill around, but like, it's cheap enough that you can get a few good casts out. And it's like, I do really like that. But then you run immediately face first into the issue of the shove is just, ugh. Like, trying to position it is yuck. Just the overall lackluster nature of the ability is yuck. And while on Deity, you can definitely get some good tanking going on. On Demonic, things get a little bit nastier, especially with the amount of magical enemies that show up, and Gallant is not very good at dealing with that. And unfortunately, unlike some other tank classes out there, it doesn't have a way to defend itself. Like, it doesn't get block. It doesn't get boosts. It's like a tanky class that then also wants to deal damage, which has its uses. But, like, man, if we've got Devout at C, I think Gallant is worse than that. But you can argue me from that one if you want.
Yeah, so I will absolutely argue that Gallant is better than Devoted. And here's why. Specifically, the skill Honorclad is so consistent that even if you don't want to use Gallant in the playthrough, what you can do is side class into Gallant and then immediately promote to a tier 3 to take Honorclad with you forward.
That's true.
I think that alone makes it extremely valuable. Consistent and guaranteed damage, again, we've been talking about this, is just so valuable. And the banner is nice, but I agree, Overpower isn't good. And as a class, the growths aren't anything amazing. It's got good might, high HP, and high defense, but the rest is like very middling and very average. Kind of similar to all of the warrior class tree growths, as you're saying. Like, they're not that great, but I think Honorclad is why I'm so high and mighty on Gallant. I don't think it's like top tier. I would definitely say it's better than Devoted for sure, just based on the utility of Honorclad and the consistency of it. But again, we're talking about Seeker with the 4 heavy vulnerable stacks. I mean, that's pretty much the same as Honorclad, honestly, except in Honorclad, it's only for you and you get it up front, whereas with Seeker, it's for everyone else and it's after combat. So, yeah, I don't know. I would be fine putting it at the top of C, honestly, or at the bottom of B. I don't feel particularly strongly about it, but I do like Honorclad with Reaper.
That's fair. And yeah, I mean, Honorclad is definitely a very solid one to carry forward. I tend to forget sometimes about certain class abilities because, like, you don't really feel the passives sometimes. They just are part of the functionality. You kind of forget about it. And so that is definitely a good one. That is definitely a good one. So I'm fine with being argued up to the top of C. That's fine. That's fine. Now, what I will say is I do not think that C is for Champion. I think at the very least, Champion probably belongs maybe in B, but I mean, I started off with Gallant, so why don't you sell me on why Champion is good or not good?
I honestly don't think Champion's that great. And it hurts me to say that because I am generally a fan of tanks, and when I look at the Champion class, it's more about damage than it is about tanking. You get the 25% boost to power, which is trying to make you into a one-shot machine, but Reaper just does that better. And then you have the abilities, which are all focused on attacking, but it's at a, you attack normally, and then you just do splash damage to enemies or splash healing to allies, but only if they're nearby. And you can't really upgrade the AoE of the splash. I think if you could upgrade the AoE of the splash, we would be talking a whole different story. You can increase the damage, you can increase the percentage of the splash a little bit, but, I think this is a pretty average class, honestly. I don't think it's anything to write home about. It doesn't do anything particularly special to me. It's got good offensive growths and a little bit of a physical defense tankiness, but I feel like that's all it really does. I think it's a very average B tier class.
Well, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think that definitely matches what it brings to the table. It is definitely situational. Like, if you can find a group of enemies that are just physical based, like hard hitting dudes, and you can plant this champion in the hallway. You'd be like that the gif of the Elder Scrolls Online with the knight, and it's got like the music playing. He's like soloing a whole party of like 5 dudes. Like that's how champion wants to function. But as soon as you have anything that isn't just one range physical based characters attacking it, it starts to run into issues. As for the abilities, like you're saying, definitely they're very situational, and yeah, if you could upgrade the AoE, that'd be a whole different thing. But I do like that when you can use them, they do hit. Like I have my champion Benji in my Deity playthrough has like it's like 75% of the damage that he deals goes into healing for allies that are next to the target. Like that's not nothing, man. Like that's a big heal, but then yeah, you have to be in the position where they're even in range to like get the heal and then need the heal in the first place. So it's definitely situational, but I think when champion is in the situation that it's built for, it shines. It's just a pretty narrow like window of opportunity. So
everything has to be going right for this class for it to work, and that's what I don't like.
That's fair. No, that's definitely fair. It's not going to get you out of any sticky spots, that's for damn sure. So yeah, I'd say bottom of B. Bottom of B is fine. And it's still an upgrade over Gallant, so we're pretty much consistently following the Warrior Tree philosophy, except for Seeker and Elisan, which are both an A. But
yeah.
All right, that's the Warrior Tree done. Not too shabby, not too shabby. And now I've kind of flip-flopped to what I want to call this tree. It's like the Ranger Tree or like the Rogue Tree, something like that. Ranger feels weird.
I've been calling it the Summoner Tree, despite summoners being known as magical, but you summon beasts. So like it's either the Beastmaster or the Summoner Tree because they all use some kind of summon.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Maybe Beastmaster is the way to go then. Yeah, that works. And with the first of our Beastmaster tree, then we have Ranger. Ranger is definitely a odd duck. I like it. I definitely like it. But a tanky, like, axe and shield class is not really the first thing that you think of when this type of class tree comes to mind. But that said, it does definitely hit. And I do really, really like the different orangutan skills. So, like, Lanky Spanky just being able to stun a priority target and take it out of the turn for a turn is really handy if you just don't have the firepower that you need to clear a whole wave. And then the fact that you can put exhaustion stacks on a particularly dodgy enemy, which just functionally is going to be giving the rest of your team that's targeting it accuracy, is really nice. So I also really like that when you drop below 50% HP, you do get a bunch of block stacks. So, you know, if you're in the tail end of a wave, you've got 1 or 2 more things coming towards you. It's like, all right, you need that last little surge of adrenaline. And then, all right, I've got the block up. We're tanking it. We're holding the line, boys. All right, it's enemy phase. I can chill now. So I think it's solid. It's definitely a better tank than Gallant or Devoted is. I don't think it's phenomenal, but it does bring some utility to the table with the orangutan skills. So I would say probably B, personally.
I think this is a good early to mid-game class because the main thing is its shield stance giving you the 8 heavy block. Early on, the heavy block is going to make a significant difference. Where it starts to fall off is in the mid to end game, which is where you want to upgrade into the next one, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But in a vacuum of early to mid game, which is where you're going to use the Ranger class, I actually think this is great. I think the skills are quite expensive, and I guess light stun is expensive enough, but it's a 1-2 range, and you can upgrade the range further to be 1-3 range and decrease the mana cost a little bit. So I think that gives it a decent amount of utility where you really want this class to tank, but also help mitigate damage from other characters. And I think it does that pretty well, honestly. I think the Ranger class is decent. The growths are pretty specialized all around. And the ability is concordant with the class. I think it's definitely a solid B tier. I think it's probably above the champion because it fulfills its role.
I would say that's true, yeah. I mean, if you're thinking about tanky classes, you know, the obvious disparity between a tier 2 and a tier 3 notwithstanding, like, Ranger's definitely the tankier of the two. It fulfills that sort of power fantasy far more than champion does. So, yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Now, how about our Sarash-cloaked, giant poleaxe-wielding man over here? What does he bring to the table? Oh, I feel like there's some thoughts coming on here for the Warden.
Warden is a class that fails on every single class design criteria.
Oof.
It is meant to be a tank class that does nothing to enhance its tankiness. It is focused on summoning out a grizzly bear and commands that do more stun And yet the mastery growth of this class is 5% extra on top of what your base is.
Oh,
The ability that it has gives adjacent allies 6 defense, as opposed to giving you even more to stack on to what Ranger does. And if that wasn't enough, when you promote from Ranger to Warden, you lose 10% defense growths and 5% HP, which in the grand scheme of things is like 1 to 2 stats between then to the end game. It's not that major, but it just feels bad. Like, why am I promoting to a higher tier of my tank class and losing growths?
it's definitely a big question mark moment for sure. The first time I saw that, I was like, huh? Why? What? Huh? Why are you doing this to me? I'm supposed to become more tanky, not less. What is this? Yeah, it's... I like that as a quote-unquote tank class. Its tankiness is supposed to come from the idea that you're splitting aggro between you and the bear. And then also you can stun priority targets. It's a cool idea. It's just the way that the action economy of any strategy RPG works that's like in this style. And then also the nature of how stats work with offense versus defense. If you're going to be tanking, you need to be actually making sure that you're taking less damage, because you cannot count on the enemy equally splitting damage between you and the bear. And if you get hit a couple of good times on the jaw, like, you're out, and that bear doesn't matter, especially if you're on demonic, when it's just going to game over you if you die. So it's a very cool class. It's a very flavorful class. It's a class that I highly recommend on anything that isn't demonic to at least play around with and have fun with. But if you're really trying to knuckle down and go for the meta, or you're playing on demonic where you just have to do that, yeah, it ain't great. It ain't great. So what do you think? Because I have an idea, but you were more down on this than I am. Where do you think this should go?
So I think this is the first instance that we're having on our tier list where your T3 is lower than the tier 2. And
I can agree with that.
I think we at least have to put it in C tier. It is, yeah. I think the grizzly bear on its own merits it, a pass from D tier, but you're only really using that bear once per fight, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's done. Once you lose that bear, it's gone.
Yeah.
And like you said on demonic, that's 1 to 2 rounds of combat. So bottom of C tier would be okay with me.
Okay. Since you're the one with the reference material on hand at the moment, is there even a way to reduce the mana cost of the bear, or is it just 100, period, done?
You can reduce the mana cost of the bear by 20 total, so it goes down to 80.
So that
with
helps,
the alternatives.
but like...
It's also sort of a one-use case unless you're funneling summoning bears.
Yeah. I cast summon bears. Yeah, it's not great. It's definitely not my go-to for tanking, that's for sure.
Yeah, like if I wanted to go into a tank class of the same tree, I would just go into the Beastmaster after Ranger.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Absolutely.
And we'll get there, but
we
this
will.
one unfortunately falls to the wayside.
Unfortunately, but can't all be winners. If you want to talk about winners, though, Cutthroat. Cutthroat is a pretty fun option. There's a little skill I'd like to come to your door with the book of the Lick-a-Tongue yank across the world into your waiting arms. Hello, Licky Lasso. What are you doing? This is a ridiculous ability. I love this ability so much. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically like base 3 range. You can either grab an enemy or an ally and pull them to you, and then choose what tile around you that they go to. This is a blue utility skill, so you can still attack afterwards. It is so dumb, and you can upgrade the range so far. It is so good for picking priority targets, and then that's before you even getting anything else, like all the different ways you can start applying poison with, like, oh, I don't know, the giant toad lick that just does more damage, puts poison stacks on stuff. You get extra bonuses from having higher stats. Like, it's... You want to talk about rogues, like, if Nightblade is the support rogue, this is your actual, like, cutthroat, literally, assassin rogue class, and I love it. I think it is easily an A-tier class just for Licky Lasso, if not higher. But what do you think?
You know what I think that no one really talks about with this class is the way the sprite is turned away from you. I think that gives just such menacing vibes on its own.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just like, this is the only class in the game, I think, that is turned away from you.
Yep.
And just giving you its back, showing you that menacing dagger. And then, yeah, you're right. Licky Lasso is just pure raw fun. Like, you get to use this frog tongue to yank an enemy out of the middle of nowhere and be like, surprise, and
Yep.
and just like now all of your characters are just dogpiling that enemy boss, whatever you want it to be. Like you're just
Yep.
yanking it out of the middle of nowhere. But the only question mark I have about this class that, I'm a little bit confused about is the fact that its base luck growth is only 20% with a skill that relies on increasing dodge and a 1-to-1 ratio based on luck. You would think it would be a little bit higher and then allow other characters within this tree to utilize it a little bit more. As it stands, Eve has a base 40% luck growth, so like 60% is not bad. But I wish it were a little bit higher just for the base of this class for the utility of the skill. I'm assuming it's a game balance thing more so than anything else. But I think this class, just for the pure utility of it, is probably up there. Like if we put the Seeker up in A tier because of its utility, this one's absolutely up there too.
Yeah. And I would argue that just the nature of Licky Lasso on its own definitely warrants a spot at the top of A. I would almost say S. The only reason I don't is just because, at least from what I've played of Deity, the entirety of Deity, and then part of Demonic, it's not so crucial that you'd be able to lasso something to like secure wins. If that was like one of your go-to W strats, then I would say S tier, but just on its own, the utility of it, is like huge. And I mean, not for nothing, I have a little bit of personal bias. I won't name names because it's definitely spoilery, but you, my friend, will be familiar. There's a certain chapter late in the game where there's a giant wall of fire separating you from some bosses. I found out you can Licky Lasso one of them over the fire. And that's just good fun. That is just good fun. Just be like, oh, what are you doing over there? Hello! So much fun. So yeah, I think top of A is a guarantee for sure. Just a phenomenal class all around. And then the big brother, big sister of Slayer, or of Slayer, that is Slayer, over Cutthroat. What the? Why does it get 2 range? I must know why it gets 2 range. It's so insane. Like, you take all of that speed and crit and dodge and just general utility and damage that you've been building up with Cutthroat, and then you hand it more of that while also letting it attack from range. And like, have you considered, what if I just had a 20% chance to just get a free attack? Potentially multiple times. Why not? Well, guess what? Slayer lets you do it. Just let's start throwing boomerang knives all over the damn place, just cutting things in half in like a flechette storm of knives. It's so nuts, dude. Like, just that ability alone has so much damage potential. And then, like, what is it, Call Wyvern? That you can reduce down to like 10 mana for severe poison stacks. Are you high? It is nuts. God. Of all the different poison application jobs, classes, whatever, of all the different dodge tank classes, Slayer is probably my favorite. And I would argue, personally, that S is for Slayer here. But you can argue me down if you want.
No, I think I'm actually going to be with you in that vein, because I think Slayer was so good when I unlocked tier 3 classes that my quick draw Zenial upgraded to Slayer instead of going Deadeye.
Nice.
Just because of how good Ricochet is. I opted to completely change the weapon type to daggers, which are already an excellent weapon type. And this one has such high speed growth. It's got good growths all around, that you're probably going to be quadding in this class, because there's a little upgrade, like we said, the ferocity upgrade, that lets you hit twice. And when you do that for a character that's already doubling, that hits 4 times, which means you're going to have a very good chance of proccing that Ricochet at least once per combat, if not twice. And add on to that one of your commands, you're potentially hitting an enemy like 5 to 6 times minimum per combat round, which is nuts.
Like, who needs a huge might stat when you can just be, like, giving them the rapid fire punch? Like, there is a world where you call and then get an octuple attack. That can happen. That is a thing that can exist. And, like, boy, howdy, I want to see it. I haven't had it happen yet, but I am chomping at the bit for it. Like,
yeah, it's death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, seriously. And, like, God forbid you start stacking any sort of, like, might elixirs or anything on someone in this class. Like, it's done. It's over. Get out of here. So, yeah, I think S tier for sure. This S is for Slayer. It is
I
disgusting.
agree. We can put it in S tier for now. I wonder if some of the later classes might dethrone it a little bit, but for now, I think of all the classes we've discussed, this is one of the most powerful ones.
Oh,
so,
easily.
Yeah, we can keep it up there.
If you tossed all these in an arena together, I would not be surprised if Slayer was the one that came out. So
Yeah.
now moving from the single like absolute gladiator queen that is Slayer into Tamer that has a lot more of a reliance on fuzzy friends. Why don't you tell us about it?
I really like the Tamer class, which is, interesting because when I initially saw that class, I was like, this is a no-brainer. This is your tank 1-2 range bow class. This is really good. And it's got some pretty solid growth all around, some nice might. But the real differentiating factor for Tamer that helps it do that massive amounts of damage is the fact that it stacks on a 40% mastery growth on top of whatever you already have. And if you have a unit like Zanil or Reardon or someone who like these classes generally, the units that are in them have high base mastery growths already, your abilities, your commands are going to be doing so much damage. And on top of that, you have Symbiosis, which adequately named because it's completely symbiotic to the class and everything it wants to do. You gain an additional 25% mastery scaling on top of your commands. And so your pets, in addition to your little pot shots that you're doing, are going to be doing massive one-hit damage potentials.
Yeah, like the chunk is disgusting. Like, if you're not at least once trying out Tamer Zanil with Call Capuchin and just watching that monkey rip someone's throat out and then rob their pockets on the way down, you're missing out, man. Like, there's no better class in this game that shows off how powerful of a stat mastery is and why it's such an important part of the combat sandbox for both Dark Deity games, but this one especially. Like, such a cool class. And then the 1-2 range with bows as well. Like, what a nice way to add a little bit of utility to an archer class, right? Just letting it counter in melee and having pretty decent defenses overall. Like, I gotta love it, man. I think it's an easy A for sure.
Well, yeah, and in addition to that, I'll raise you one further. Is Call the Pride, I think, is actually underrated. Especially,
Oh, yeah.
Especially in demonic difficulty, because you're getting an AoE light block applied to all allies within 2 tiles.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. And you're also applying it to yourself and spreading it. So your entire team is all of a sudden tankier, not just you. And with that high level of mastery as well, that's going to scale up to some pretty extreme levels. Like my Zanil at the end game was doing 40 light block stacks on herself and 20 to all allies within 2 tiles, which is nuts. It's crazy. Like, you're taking no damage for a turn at least for Call the Pride. Now, it's 70 mana and it's expensive, but, in a pinch, it's very nice to have.
Yeah, just a panic button, don't touch us, we're big. And they won't, because they can't. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, are you happy with A, or do you want to bump it to S? I mean...
No, I agree with A.
Okay.
I agree with A.
Okay.
I think the mana cost limits it a little bit, so I think A is a good control for it.
All right, we'll put it right in the middle, and then if we want to adjust where it's at later, we certainly can. So, I mean, I personally, I like it more than Reaper. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, of course, it wouldn't be a good class if it didn't have an even better upgrade. Let's talk about, since I did the last tier 3, I know you just did a tier 2, but sell us on our dual crossbow wielding lass here, because
Yeah, I think we can start doing 2 and 2 each. I think
right.
that makes sense.
All right.
So I would love to talk about Beastmaster. Again, one of my favorite classes in the game. If 1 crossbow wasn't enough, you get 2, and you get an even higher bump to your mastery. This is what classes should be like. You should be good in your 2, and you should be better in your 3. And you get a bump to your tankiness, your defense, and your fortitude. You get a bump to your HP. You get a bump to your mastery. And even more important than that, which is completely synergistic, is the Beast Whisperer skill. Command Pet costs half mana. That expensive 70 cost Call the Pride, that's 35 now. That makes it usable. This Command Cerberus class that deals heavy block, that gives you heavy block, that's 37 cost or 38 cost now. Not to mention that these abilities can all be upgraded further to decrease the mana cost a lot more or increase the number of stacks that you get. So I love everything about the Beastmaster class. I think this is hands down an S tier class. It's going to do massive damage and has massive amounts of utility in addition to that, with relatively cheap mana cost that lets you continue the upkeep. I think this is, a pretty perfect class, honestly.
I would completely agree. I mean, yeah, just not even just like going to usable. Like call the Pride at half mana, that's spammable. Like, you with mana regen, just base mana regen, let alone if you toss in like a Scholar or something like that, you can just have light block on almost your entire party for basically the whole map if you wanted. Like, it is so ludicrously strong. I adore it. So, yeah, I mean, I think S tier is definitely the right place for it to be. Just no notes. Like, it can attack in melee and at range. It's got mastery, so all of its advanced stats are good. You've got all the different call skills. I mean, if you use it with Zanil, you're making money off of it. Like, yeah, absolutely top tier. Very, very strong class. Now, these ones are going to be interesting. Quick Draw. Quick Draw is your more standard. I kind of equated it to like Legolas in my class overview video. Like rapid fire arrows, it's in the name, Quick Draw. General damage dealing, applying bleed, and different things like that. Weakening enemies with your hyena. Definitely a solid class overall, but not one that I would say has the same amount of punch personally as the first few, or the Cutthroat and Tamer that we dealt with. That Ranger probably lags a little bit behind, but I like Quick Draw as a damage class. It always feels a little weird having the like hyena laugh to weaken your enemies. Like, it's good, but it doesn't really go with the rest of what the class is trying to do. It's just kind of like a backup utility option. But I mean, if you're able to double, get refunds, do extra damage with the hyena, get the bleed going, like, it's not bad. It's certainly a solid range damage dealer. I'd say it's probably like a B tier class, but it doesn't blow me away like some of the others we've talked about.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the nice thing about Quick Draw, again, and I'll keep referencing like growths and objective data, but
Yeah, do it.
growths wise, this is like your offensive class in this group. It's like 25% might, 35% speed, 30% dex. All of your growth is concentrated into those 3 offensive skills. And so it's really focused on you and not so much your ability. It takes a hit in the mastery department in a class that mostly wants to do summons. It's only got 10% mastery, which is almost on the same level as Ranger and Warden, which is confusing because, again, you want to use these summons, but this class isn't focused on that. It's focused on doubling, and Alacrity is there to help regen mana a little bit, which is honestly kind of confusing because like you're going to need to regen a lot of mana to upkeep these skills because it doesn't get the discount, and you're really going to have to go into the upgrades to do that. So I don't think it's a bad class. I think it's good if you want to grow in this class and then lateral into something else, but I don't think it does anything super special. I agree with you. I think it's like a very, very average, like middle to bottom of B tier. I think it's worse than Ranger, honestly, because Ranger is actually pretty good at what it wants to do. I would be willing to put it almost at the bottom of B.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm down with that. Absolutely. I feel like there's just enough, not anti-synergy, but lack of synergy between the different abilities and passives that Quick Draw brings to the table. It'll get the job done, but I don't think it's the job that you're particularly happy to be in. Maybe if you could, like, go here and then go into Slayer, but still get Licky Lasso, so you could have more mana to Licky Lasso things with, that'd be fun, but there's a reason it's not set up that way. So, yeah, I think this is a comfortable spot for it.
Yeah, and the Light Weak is kind of questionable because it wants you to be like in the midst of a bunch of enemies on a class that has almost no defenses. Like if this was sort of similar to a Chain Lightning or a Transfusion where it jumps to a couple enemies, that would be really good. But honestly, that would make more sense for an archer. I don't know why they didn't do that. Maybe I'll suggest it. But this skill should be tweaked.
I would agree, definitely. It almost in a way feels like, and obviously like they're keeping it to like 1 animal per class, but if the Laugh was on Ranger and the Lanky Spanky was on Quick Draw, I feel like that would almost work better, right? Because then like you could run up with Quick Draw, you could slap one enemy and then kill the other one that's next to it, kill his buddy, whereas the Ranger could just run into the middle and laugh at everyone, and then he'd be able to tank better, right? So
yeah, I agree. That's actually a really good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so I feel like there's a little bit of a mismatch there in what class has what skill in this tree. And that's where we're kind of getting some of our issues with. Because, like, you look at Slayer and Beastmaster, and they're, like, self-contained. Their whole kit works with themselves. No notes, right? And then these other ones, a lot lower because you don't have that, so.
Yeah.
Now, Deadeye. Deadeye is definitely an interesting one. So, I had a weird experience with this class, like, both the Tier 2 and the Tier 3. Because I had them on Reardon, but my Reardon didn't really double. He had like bigger single target damage. Like I would have been happier if I could have made him, or like single shot damage, I should say. So I would have been happier if I could have had him at like Seeker into Elisant, honestly. So I feel like I don't have a great experience with Deadeye as a whole. But I mean, it did have punch. Like, I'll give it that. But like, honestly, I'm struggling to remember what it even did, because I just kind of shot stuff with Reardon and that was it. He didn't do anything fancy. So if you could refresh my memory on what Deadeye has going for it, I don't really even remember.
Yeah, Deadeye is like objectively, it's a pure upgrade to Quick Draw in almost every department, right?
Yes,
It gets more,
yes.
it gets more might, it gets more mastery, and then the speed and all the other stuff are the same. It only takes like a 5% hit in Dex, which again is weird, but
Yeah.
it's pretty much an upgrade everywhere else. The interesting thing about it is that lethality is kind of weird for this, because how often are you really getting that much overkill damage in a class that isn't doing massive crits? Like, lethality would have been really good on something like the Reaper class, right? Because that's a class that's focused on doing damage. So I would have liked to see something else over this one. I feel like the class skill here is a little bit undertuned for this one. Wind Buffet is also interesting, and I didn't think about this before, but as we were talking about Slayer quads, I wonder if you used Wind Buffet on a Slayer that's quadding, would they do 8 attacks instead, because every attack is doubling even more? I kind of want to try that. That sounds like it would be kind of disgusting.
If it actually works that way, there's no way it's intentional. I refuse to believe, but it would be hysterical.
You'd be doing 16, because you're quadding at base, and then you're doubling that to do 8. And if all 8 ricochet, that's 16 plus whatever summon you're using. That's up to 17 attacks in one turn, which is hilarious.
I mean, at that point, you just start ricocheting to other enemies on the board because their first target's dead 3 times over. Holy smokes.
That would be so funny. But yeah, I mean, the Command Hawk skill does a decent amount of base damage, and I think that's sort of what this class is trying to do, is it's trying to let you double guaranteed, but it already does that. So yeah, I don't know. It's in this very weird sort of middling. This class isn't terrible, but it doesn't really do anything amazing either. Like, I definitely don't think it deserves the downgrade that we got for Warden from Ranger, because they both kind of maintain it, but I think it's just on the same level of what the Quick Draw class was. It's just kind of much of the same, and it doesn't really do anything special.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think the one thing that it does do that's special, that is cool, is that Wing Buffet and just being able to guarantee a double on something. Like, if you can just put that on a boss and then have your normally only swinging once champion walk up and suddenly do twice as much damage, like, that is pretty sick. I'm not going to lie, and it's the only ability in the game that lets you do that. But is that enough to justify a whole class? Probably not anything really better. I would say it gets a little bit of a bump over its previous tier of class just for that, but no more, I would say. So, and that is our rogue classes done. Now we start to move on to the real juicy stuff with Mage, followed by Adept, followed by Druid, Shaman, whatever you want to call it. So in the Mages, there's some fun stuff to talk about here. So you want to tell us about Geomancer into Cosmician?
Yeah, I love this chain. I think
yeah.
the minute I saw it, I was like, this is perfect, because Geomancer is a purely utility-based class, right? And, you know, the growths absolutely reflect that. With Geomancer, you're getting that 30% mastery, 40% HP, and then the defense isn't bad. It's 20%. But otherwise, all of the other the growths are pretty average, and it's focused on the fact that you need to survive a little bit, and you need to help others survive. And so Star Surge is your big ticket ability, which is rescue, essentially. And it gives it a little bit of extra oomph on top of that, of dealing damage to, you know, if your unit or your tank is surrounded by a bunch of enemies, and you Surge yank them out of there, and the enemies are weak, you could potentially kill, like, all of them if your Star Surge does enough damage. And then you have Moonlight, which is just your bread and butter kind of ranged distance heal with upgrades to give it more ranged or more heals. These are very good abilities just all around. And Astral Blessing is even better, because any mana you spend gives block to 2 allies within 2 tiles. It's just consistent. You get extra defense that doesn't wear off until you get hit. And so there's just an added bonus all around. I think Geomancer, honestly, might be... It's either at the top of A or one of our S tier 2 classes. I think it is fantastic.
I would absolutely argue S tier as well. I was waiting to see if you were going to go there, but that's what I've been thinking the whole time. Absolutely. Like, and the versatility as well, because, like, yeah, you know, Star Surge, you can yank your tank out of a bad situation, give him that classic tank yank, but it's also a good offensive ability if you're trying to push your line forward. Like, that's how I've used it the most. Just like, we tanked a bunch of stuff. There's an opening. I run my Geomancer through it. There's targets for them to shoot at as well. But then I just yoink the tank forward, ready to go to the next part of the battle line, and just blow up everyone that was standing around them that are, like you were saying, already weakened. So, like, it's insanely good. The heal on Moonlight is not going to be as big as, like, dedicated single-target melee range heals, but you don't typically need it to be either. Like, it does more than enough, and having the versatility of it being at range is great. And then, yeah, the block. Like, oh my god. It's just... it's a complete package, and like it's not a completely offense-oriented attack, like class or type of class, but it still hits. Like it's not a slouch. So yeah, it's just good all around, man. Absolutely S tier. I completely agree with you on that. You're always happy to take someone through Geomancer, even if they're going to go into a different tier 3. I would say, except maybe Relic Knight. So now the question though, Cosmician, how do we feel about that one?
If I loved Geomancer, just by looking at the sprite of Cosmician, like whoever designed that sprite, badass.
Oh yeah.
It is such a cool sprite. The animations are amazing. Like the whole space concept of it, brilliant. And to tack onto that, you know, we were talking earlier about classes improving where they need to improve. Cosmician does exactly that. The mastery was 30% base in Geomancer. We're going to crank that up to 40% at the cost of a little bit of HP. But that's all you need, because if you look at Cosmician, now you're just talking about pure, unadulterated, unfiltered, you know, uncensored damage. And the mastery helps scale that damage up to crazy amounts. My Meteor on my endgame Arthur was doing 125 damage to a single enemy. And if you give him the ring that creates the 50% splash damage, that's 62 to adjacent ones. You're like almost killing 3 enemies with a single meteor. And if you don't know why I love meteors, it's pretty like, you know, lore relevant. But I just love this class so much. Astral Reckoning I used a little bit less because the damage is significantly lower in an AoE. It can be useful and it does heal allies in that area if you use it. But this class to me is just Meteor. And to add on to that, the special skill, the class skill Imperial Magic, just gives you another free 15 mastery when your HP is full. Just casual more damage, you know, no big deal.
Yep.
So yeah, I think this class is easily an S tier nuke class that, you know, you can just delete an enemy at will.
I would definitely agree as well. I think S tier is perfectly fine, and it will definitely go above Geomancer because, like, obviously it's just the upgraded version. Yeah, just that raw damage output, man. Like, what can you say? Damage is king. You get more damage if your HP is full. You're a squishy mage, so you're probably in the back line with full HP anyway. Just nuke stuff, man. I don't know. There's probably not many just straight up better raw damage in the game. It's pretty nuts. So yeah, Cosmician is an easy S tier for sure. Now, while it's probably not going to be at the same objective tier, we got to talk about Warlock and Necromancer, my personal, one of my 2 favorite classes in the game, followed shortly thereafter by my other favorite one, which we'll talk about. I love a good drain tank. A good magic drain tank is always like I'm a sucker for that type of thing. I'm a huge simp for any sort of like lifesteal effects or anything like that. And Warlock definitely starts to get there. It's a little bit of an odd class. I get that because of the whole idea of like wanting to walk up and poison Nova something, but it's also a fragile class. But if you hit something in with your attack that is poisoned, then you get healing. So it's like, okay, well, if I'm durable enough, then I can drain tank through a bunch of stuff. And the damage output is very, very nice on Warlock. Add on top of that the fact that you have Hellfire, which early in the game, when you're going to be getting your first Warlock, I think is like the longest range ability you have in terms of direct damage. So there's nice utility in that on its own. It does decent damage. It's a lot of fun, man. I really, really like Warlock. It's too fragile to make full use of the poison drain, but when you can get a good turn going where you're able to just keep getting hit and draining, it's a ton of fun. I think it's a pretty easy A tier, but you can argue me down if you'd like.
Yeah, I think Warlock is an interesting one, right? Because it wants to be sort of that Nosfera tank level class, right? And I think the fact that attacking a poisoned enemy heals your unit for the amount of damage you do is really, really strong because they have some pretty good might growths. It's 25%. But where this suffers is its speed growth. It only has a 10% base speed growth, and a lot of the units that can go into this class, barring I think Aya's the only one who can really make use of it, is that you're not going to be doubling much. And on Demonic, that gets even worse. And so you're really depending on that single hit to heal you for how much damage you've taken. You need to dish out the same amount of damage you've done to sustain it. And I think you probably can in the right scenario, but it will require some engineering to do. It's a tricky class. I honestly can't say that I've used this neither on Deity or on Demonic, so I'm having trouble ranking it. But to me, it wasn't something that's super enticing, though I know a lot of people are very gung-ho about the Warlock and Necromancer line.
I think the thing that helps with everything that you're saying, because you're completely correct in everything that you're saying, especially with like the low speed and everything, is that ideally you are fighting stuff that's poisoned. So you can kind of bring their speed and their damage down to you, which is fun. It's only light poison, but it's also not to say that, it's only the poison applied by your Nova that you can be going into, something with Grim Stroke or other things like that also very much facilitates the class. So I think it is definitely a class that is partially reliant on the rest of your team comp. And so it isn't that sort of like self-sufficient bomb that some of our other like super high tier stuff is. But I do think it does have a level of durability through that drain tanking that is good. And that level of mass poison application, while maybe not the most powerful thing with light poison, can be the difference maker. So, I would say high B, if nothing else, just because of the utility it brings to the table with the poison.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, cool. I think it fulfills a semi-similar role in terms of poisoning that Nightblade does. So we can go there. Now, Necromancer. This is a very interesting one. I am going to have to be tempered a little bit here, because if I'm already a simp for drain tanking, I am a huge simp for anything Necromancy. So I'm going to rely on you to anchor me a little bit, or otherwise I'm just going to fly to the moon. But Necromancer is a ton of fun. I'm not going to argue that it's strictly as good as Cosmission or anything like that. I'm not that crazy. But the ability to just put a body on the board, and with especially like ability upgrades and everything, making that fairly cheap to do, really pretty considerable. Just being able to put a guy down that runs into the enemy, it scales with your mastery, so you can get them pretty powerful, and absorbs hits, does some damage for you, keeps things away from your squishier units, is very, very nice. And like I had 2 Necromancers on my Deity run, and so by the end of a map, I would often have 8-10 zombies running around just cleaning house for me. It was really nice. Beyond that, just the ability to just directly drain life and sustain yourself while dealing damage is definitely nice. It means that if you can go into a little bit of a more combat-y sort of Necromancer build, you'll be a bit happier. And with things like rings and stuff like that, you can make it happen. On Demonic, I'm not entirely sure. We're definitely going to see how I can make that work, if I can make it work once I get there. But I do think that there's some nice utility here that's fairly unique to the class. So I'd say just the ability to summon zombies alone puts you at A tier. But
yeah, I like that. But my issue here is I fail to see where the synergy going from Warlock into Necromancer is, or from any other of the other classes into Necromancer is. It just feels like a tier 3 class that was kind of thrown out there. I would have liked to see some more focus on the poison element here, because we've just come from a playstyle that's like very drain heavy and enemy phase tanking and applying poison to our allies, and then here we're just kind of summoning or having like a straight up damage skill, which isn't a bad thing by any means, but the mastery growth on this class is not great. So you're not going to get that massive level of scaling that Cosmission gets for its nukes, albeit you're healing yourself. And the enemies dying within 2 tiles, granting 20 mana, is really nice because it isn't just limited to you killing things. If your allies kill things, you'll regenerate that mana and you'll use it to animate immediately, which is really, really nice. That synergy is great. But it's just kind of odd that it doesn't continue to play on the poison drain tanking thing. So I also didn't use this, so I can't say, but I can definitely agree that creating your own army a la solo leveling is quite fun.
Yes.
Not gonna lie.
Absolutely.
So, I would easily put this above the Warlock, but they just do 2 different things, so it doesn't really feel like an upgrade, if that makes sense.
I get that. I think this is one of the rare instances where you actually get a much better result if you tech into tier 3 off of a different tier 2.
Yeah.
So my first experiment with Necromancer was Arthur Warlock into Necromancer, and it worked well enough, partially because Arthur's just the GOAT. But then I used Kalith Geomancer into Necromancer, and she became, and I know I talked about my weird build that I have with her with you in your video, but more just having a very utility support heavy, essentially just summoner, was really nice, because like at that point she had the ability to blind stuff because of her own personal skill. She had the ability to rescue people around and deal some damage that way. She had the ability to heal. She had the ability to summon zombies. And by doing the whole kind of like pushing the battle line forward by star surging my tank forward, meant that she was very often near enough to the thick of it that she was getting that mana regen and making it easier for her to summon more zombies. So that played really well. And just from the like getting the mana to do what you need to do and continue to support your allies type of role, which maybe not exactly what you would think of for a Necromancer normally, but it did play really nicely. So I mean,
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think it has its own niche. It just feels like there's like some kind of missing link between the two classes. But otherwise, in a vacuum, I agree. It's pretty synergistic with itself.
All right, very good. Now, something that is a bit more synergistic with itself, and that I definitely have a soft spot for. This is my other favorite in the Mage tree. Why don't you tell us about the Aegis and Relic Knight, sir? Because this is
I think I'm gonna let you talk about it.
Oh,
it's your favorite.
okay.
I'll take the next one. You gotta take these two.
I mean, if you're gonna give me the chance, then I won't say no. Like, okay. So there's a reason that Alden is our image for this particular class here, right? Because Alden is the beast. If you want a tanky mage, and there's pretty much like always some sort of tank option, good or bad, in each of the different trees, this is the way you're going to go. Aegis is very, very interesting because it is actually a melee-based tank class in your mage tree. But it does that not only by having very, very solid defensive growths with your HP, and especially your defense and your fortitude, but it desperately wants to be hit. Because when it's hit, two things happen. You get your reflection passive skill that makes your next attack deal more damage in turn. And then you have your repulsor shield ability that you can put on yourself or your ally, so you can do a support roll with this as well, that makes the enemy take damage every time they hit you, before you even attack them back. And then you will be doing more damage on the crackback as well, which is just nuts. I honestly, I would make the argument that this is the best tank class in the game, personally. If it didn't have the good growths that it has, that'd be one thing. But before we even get into Relic Knight, just Repulsor Shield alone is so, so nice. And then I've barely used it, so I can barely remember. The other skill puts blind on, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's a lot of blind.
It is a lot of blind. So yeah, if you're trying to like protect and like a vulnerable ally that maybe doesn't have the defenses, because Repulsor Shield does not give defense. There's no actual direct defensive stat buff here. It's all just growths and then what you do with that natural tankiness. But if you're trying to protect a squishy ally, just blind an enemy, and then more likely than not, they won't hit you. So it's still nice. But yeah, Repulsor Shield is just such an absolutely insane ability because it doesn't fall off until it actually hits its like end of turn limit. It lasts for 3 turns base. You can stack it. Every stack will do its own iteration of damage to the enemy when they hit you. And you can make the duration last longer. Like, it's just, what more do I have to say? Literally just let the enemies explode against your mighty shield. Done. And then you can hit him with a sword if you need. It's S tier. I think it's just S tier.
I know where you want to put this. Yeah, I know you want to put it
argue me down. Argue me down. It's fine.
No, I don't want to argue you down. I want to potentially argue you up, if anything.
Oh, shit.
My question for you is, how many times and does reflection stack, or does it only do it once? Because if you're getting hit by ranged enemies, you're not counterattacking them technically. So does reflection stack?
That is a great question, and while I've never actually paid direct attention to it, I don't think it does.
Okay. If it did, this class would be bonkers because you're just getting stacks of 20% damage on top of each other while enemy phase tanking, and then you go and you just blow up a single enemy in the next turn.
Right.
Which would be great.
I'm trying to think if I've ever encountered anything like that, and I think I just, with how much I just threw Alden into the front line, I would have incidentally run into it at some point, and I never have, so I think you just get that 20% boost.
Okay,
It,
that's
it
fair enough.
merits testing, though. It merits testing.
That's fair enough. I mean, I think you nailed it. I don't really have much to add on top of that. Repulsor shield going for 4 turns. That's like half some of the battles, and you just slap that on one of your tanks, other tanks, and this one, and you don't have to worry about rebuffing for pretty much a very long time.
And it's not particularly pricey either. It's like if it was like 80 mana, that'd be one thing, but it's not. It's like 40 base or something.
It's 45, and you can take it down to 35 if you want. Though
Yeah.
I would argue the first upgrade you should do is absolutely increasing the duration because
Oh,
you'll get
absolutely.
more bang for your buck that way. But it's still an excellent skill, and it self-targets. It's got some ranged utility. Like, this class is very underrated. I regret that I did not use it in my Deity playthrough, but I'm using it now on Demonic, and it's been extremely effective.
Absolutely. I again, like, there's other good options out there, but I personally really do think that it's the best tank class in the game. Like, this with Relic Knight, obviously, like the whole tree of it, but it's good. It's real good.
Yeah.
So, and of course, then we have to go and talk about Relic Knight. And much like a lot of these classes, I've been noticing kind of the trend as we've been talking about stuff. You get a lot of utility with your tier 2 most of the time, and then you get the damage in tier 3 in terms of abilities, and it's the exact same thing here. So when you go into Relic Knight, linking if you have the actual growth changes and stuff, I'm terrible with that type of stuff, so I'm just leaving it to you. But you get 2 very nice damage abilities. The names are escaping me at the moment, but one is basically, it's like kind of like an Astra. You can trigger, you hit 3 times for a reduced damage amount, which improves with your scaling with mastery. And then you get the ability to have, at the start of your turn, enemies that are around you just take a chunk of damage because you have like a spinning vortex of blades around you. Which obviously synergizes very, very well with what the class is trying to do. Either if you just need to burst something down and hit them 3 times, you can. Or if you're like, I've got my repulsor shields up, I'm going to walk in, and anything that doesn't break itself upon my body is going to get torn to shreds by the tornado. Like, I mean, like, what more do you need to say? Phase that with a scholar into the middle of the enemy force and watch it just turn into a red mist. It is so hysterically fun. Absolutely phenomenal. But what are the growths and stat changes? Because I don't remember.
Yeah, so the weird thing with Relic Knight is it actually loses 5% defense and fortitude in favor of an extra 10% to might, which I don't really think it needs. Again, this is like one of the weird design things that feel like a typo to me. Like, why are we doing that? And then, yeah, in terms of the class ability, killing an enemy grants +6 defense and fortitude.
Oh,
until next turn. This is
Unstoppable,
great.
yeah. Oh my god,
Yeah.
I forgot about Unstoppable.
This is just excellent. Like, we talk a lot and we harp a lot about tank classes not having synergistic abilities. This is what a tank class ability should be. This is exactly what you want. You want something that's consistent until the end of the next turn, and it's going to be there and increase your tankiness. It's perfect. And I think the abilities are very interesting because Swirling Blades, while it's branded as like a red damage ability, it is very much more so a passive of sorts. It sticks around for 6 turns, which is crazy. I mean, I think that scales depending on your mastery.
It does.
And it deals a decent chunk of damage to adjacent enemies on the turn start. So, you know, you're going to tank on enemy phase, and then what Swirling Blades is going to do is it's going to clean up on player phase to let you do something else so that maybe you don't have to attack those enemies after you've reflected damage. You kind of just, you know, sweep up. It's like a little, you know, Hoover. You're just like sucking all the enemies up. You're just, you know, swapping out the remains.
Your own personal Roomba just circling around you.
Exactly. And you can increase the duration of it. You can, you know, increase the cost and the damage of it if you want. You can reduce the cost of it, or you can increase the scaling of it. So, like, all of the upgrades are great for this to let you customize it for what you want to do. But the weird thing for me is Blade Storm. Because it attacks 3 times at 31% reduced power. So I'm assuming that's 70% power 3 times instead. Right? Is that how it works?
Yes, and then that scaling gets better as you get like your mastery and everything, so you can get pretty high damage numbers with it.
So the confusing thing to me is I was looking at one of the upgrades the other day when I was working on my class video, and one of the upgrades is increases percentage mastery scaling by -20%. And when you hit that, it lowers the power, but the same number of attacks. Like, so I just clicked it, now it's 22% reduced power.
Right.
So I'm assuming that just scales it up in the other way. Like, the description is kind of confusing, but now it's 3 times at 78%, I'm guessing, instead.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually almost wrote a bug report about that until I like actually uncrossed my eyes and reread it again. I was like, okay, wait, hold on. The wording is just weird. This is how this would work. So yeah, as the mastery scaling gets better, it reduces the severity of the damage penalty for you.
Okay,
one way to
that
put
makes
it.
a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And then another fun thing to do that will cost you your entire mana bar is to increase the mana cost in attacks by 100%. So now you're attacking 6 times at 78%. What's the math by that? That's like 480 minus 12. That's 468% damage. That is a pretty big
That's
nuke.
pretty good. And I mean, you can say this is a sword wielding class, so you can like slap a boosted Zweihander or something on there and just blender somebody.
Yep.
So
yeah. I like it a lot. It's a tank class that does its job really well, and if you really need that in a pinch, just absolute nuke to destroy a boss in one shot, you got your Blade Storm if you want to upgrade it that way. You can do it.
Absolutely.
I love it. I don't have enough experience with it to rank it, so I will defer to you. Aegis I've been using on Demonic, and I think it's been very good, but I will, let your judgment take a hold of the Relic Knight.
I think S tier is definitely good. I can't put it higher than some of the other S tiers that we have, just because like the utility of Geomancer and the raw nuke potential of Cosmician, the self-sufficiency of the others, like those are all phenomenal. But for the role that Relic Knight wants to fill, it fills it well, and then can still do other stuff, which is phenomenal. So yeah, I think cozily in S tier is where it belongs.
That's very fair.
All right. Now I will let you move on after I have now gotten off my high horse of the Aegis Relic Knight train. Please tell us about Scholar and Lore Master.
Yeah, so these two are some of my favorite classes in the game. I really love what they do. These are purely utility-based mages that can also do some pretty significant player phase damage if you need it, because of the fact that most of their abilities are utility abilities. It will leave you open to attacking later on in the turn if you position yourself accordingly, which in a lot of times can be quite clutch. The ability for the Scholar class, Building Knowledge, might not look very good, but by the end of the chapter, that fortitude continues to stack cumulatively. You'll be able to mage tank a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And phase, warp.
Yep.
Warp will always be useful for pushing forward, for getting objectives. Like, this on its own, I think, earns this class a spot either at the top of A or in S tier.
I would say so. I mean, that's before you even get into Ancient Writ, which just the ability to like move mana around is also so important for certain like strats and builds and stuff. This is like the ultimate facilitator class. So I personally, I know we're getting top heavy, but I think there's just a lot of really good class ability synergy in these trees. So I would be happy with it at S tier, honestly.
Yeah.
Like you could literally never go to Lore Master. You could just have someone as a Scholar for the whole game and be pretty happy, I would say.
Yeah, I agree.
So if that's not a good indicator of a strong class, I don't know what is.
I agree. And then I'm assuming you just want me to transition into Lore Master, because Lore Master just gets even better. Like any of the 4 starting units can go into Lore Master. The abilities that it has aren't anything game breaking. I think the major utility with Lore Master is its making history skill. Allies within 2 tiles expend 15% less mana. This might be one of the best support skills in the game, because mana economy is so important, and saving that 15% mana on your refresher is really important. On your Elisant, like we talked about earlier, with the full draw at ranged is really good because it lets you do more. On those high mana skills, that 15% will make a difference throughout the chapter. It'll give you 1 extra use of those high use abilities. So I think from a utility perspective is great. Now, is it S tier on its own? Not really. I think Scholar has that utility covered, but I don't think Lore Master does. Making history is very good, but other than that, there's no real reason to go into Lore Master. Like, the Breaker is AoE is like damage to all units within 2 tiles, including allies. I would never use this. And Rousing History, applying Light Vulnerable up to 5 enemies within 2 tiles. Again, it wants you to be in the thick of things in a class that's very paper thin. So I would even argue that the Lore Master is like more so towards the bottom of A, sort of where Necromancer is, and maybe even the top of B. The only thing it has going for it is making history.
That took a very interesting turn at the end there. That was very interesting. I mean, I'm 100% with you on the Breaker. I don't really understand it as a skill. Like, I get just having a bomb ability is nice, but like Cosmician is out here just also doing bomb abilities without, actually not just without endangering its allies, healing its allies. So like, why does the Breaker need to blow up your own boys? I don't know. That one's a little odd. But I mean, making history, Sir, I think I have to wipe some dust off of the tomes, the grimoires out here to bust this quote out for you. I believe a great man once said, magic is everything.
Oh, yes.
So, as a particular enjoyer of old school FEH stuff yourself, I imagine you probably can get the importance of just letting more spells come out. So, just that passive alone, I would say, earns it a spot in A. S is definitely for Scholar, for sure. Those skills are just insane. But being able to just make all of your spells and abilities more efficient is worthy of a slot in A. Bottom of A if you want, sure, but I like it.
Yeah, I would definitely keep it in A. I think maybe I was a little bit harsh on downgrade it down to B.
That was like, whoa, hold on now.
when I was looking back at the objective data, right? All about the objective data, the only reason to go into Lore Master is making history. And there's no other reason. Like, the growths are solid, but most of the time you're phasing, or you're ancient ridding, or you're sort of positioning yourselves for allies to take off from that making history. Like, one of my favorite things to do, and we'll talk about this later, is with Saxon, I would use Divine Overflow. Like, that's a big mana cost skill, and saving 15% on that is huge in the long run. So, I guess maybe I shouldn't underestimate it a little bit or undercut it a little bit, but yeah, an A tier class, but not as good as Scholar.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, other than the big AoE of the Breaker, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if those two sets of skills were swapped just for their raw power, right? But I mean, I'm happy that they're not. It's so nice to have right from the beginning with Alden even, so not too shabby.
Yeah.
I did 2 in a row. Do you want to do 2 in a row? Do you want to take Gale Tempest, or should I do it?
No, you can go ahead.
All right. Gale and Tempest. I mean, just the FE Swordmaster vibes alone make this one pretty awesome. But as an actual class, getting into the Adept tree here, I really like these. I know not just you, but others have been a little mixed on them. Like, people either really like them or not super hot on them. But I like the utility of a class that is able to swap between physical and magical at will. I think that's really nice. And while I think it's Stormborn is the name of the ability, is a little pricey at 35, you can reduce it. And what's cool is certain swords can have the ability to have their damage made magical by default. Stormborn then immediately allows you to switch it back to physical. So like, it still synergizes with that rune, which I think is really nice. So as a mixed melee, physical, and magical damage dealer that can do some crits, do some dodging, weaken enemies, deal more damage to weakened enemies, I think it's very solid. The big thing that's holding it back for me is that the Ravaging Winds is a line. I get it, but if you could hit wider, not longer, I think it would be more effective overall, because it's hard to get a bunch of enemies in a line like that. That said, when you can, Gale absolutely pops off, because the damage boost and the fact that it's not going to take very much damage in return is really nice. It's not the best Adept class. I'd say maybe it's my second favorite, though, out of the tree. I think it's fairly solid, but yeah, probably like top of B, maybe. What do you think?
This is easily a tier 2 class to me.
Ooh, all right.
Yeah, it doesn't have the might growth to really prop it up and make use. Like, you need the weakness stacks to make this class operate. And it seems to be a speedy class that wants to double and make use of those heavy weak stacks, but also want to crit because it's got high luck and high dex. And at the same time, it's pretty fragile, so it wants to dodge so that it can be on the front line with those heavy weak stacks and do that extra damage. But if you get hit, you're dead in this class because the HP growth is pretty poor. And it only gets worse as you go into Tempest, which is flabbergasting. I'll get to that. Ravager Winds, I completely agree with you on. I'm not a huge fan of positional skills in general, because position, it's on the fly. You don't know what the AI is going to do. You don't know how they're going to move or operate or who they're going after. It's very difficult to get all those 5 units in a line. And if by some kind of miracle you do, then great. Gale's going to do very well. Stormborn is a gimmick. It is either useful or absolutely useless. And because, again, I value that consistency, and I like that you can switch between physical and magical, sure, it's just not consistent. You can bring it down to 15 mana, which makes it a low budget sort of switch, and it's nice. but I don't think it's anything to like super write home about, honestly. And with both of these abilities being kind of middling and Turbine being completely dependent on applying those weak stacks in the first place, like this is a terrible class.
Very, very interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to bump it down a bit. That's fine. I don't know that I would personally go with it being a terrible class. I've made good use of it myself, but if you're looking for that consistency, then yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. And like we were talking about a little while back with like not being able to gauge, that was actually in the other video now I think about it, like having something that needs to rely on what the enemy is doing is basically a non-starter. So I do get that with the Ravaging Winds for sure. I think I'm just a lot higher on Stormborn than you are, because I do like to see like what enemies have what resistances where, and being able to adapt where my Gale is in response to that. I do enjoy that type of gameplay loop. Maybe it's partially my enjoyment that makes me see it more highly, but I think I would put this above Gallant for sure.
Sure. I think in the
top of
early
C
game,
is fine.
so I'll fix it this way. I think in the early game, Gale has a lot more utility because a lot of the maps are either primarily physical or primarily magical, and being able to swap between those makes the Gale a lot more powerful. But as you go into the end game, you will, like, Stormborn's going to drop off because you're going to end up going against a lot of different types of enemies based on where you are. And if the only thing you're doing is using Stormborn to swap, then fine. But if you're going into any of the other classes, you're likely going to want to use some of the other abilities.
That's true.
So,
no, that's true. That's true. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm fine with. I'm good with C. C is all right.
yeah, we can put it at the top of C.
All right. Sounds like a plan. All right. Now, Tempest. I mean, I'm just gonna say top tier, exclusively not on this list, but top tier animations. I do really like the crit animations. Pretty sick.
Oh yeah,
goes back to that classic GBA Swordmaster look, which is always a good look for sure. I used my Mashal as a Tempest in Deity, and she did very, very well. But I'm willing to bet, I never really looked at the time, but I'm willing to bet because I was using her so much that she was higher level than the enemy most of the time. So she was getting some boosts that the class cannot otherwise rely on due to her personal passive. So I'm having a hard time evaluating Tempest because that's the only use case I had for it, really.
Tempest is a very disappointing class. Because again, you think about this class that wants to do the crit thing with Gathering Storm, and it's 7 crit for every enemy within 2 tiles. So again, you need it to be a frontliner on a unit that's not a frontliner of sorts, or you need them to be like enemy phased, or you walk straight up to them, and then it's a very high mana cost skill that sure you can upgrade down a little bit, but the enhancements aren't good. Like you can enhance the duration of it and get that crit to last for 4 attacks, but 7 crit isn't very much. And then increasing the crit by 1, that bumps it to 8 crit for every enemy within 2 tiles. That's
And with the speed of the class, that's the thing that bugs me about that ability, is you burn through that buff so fast. If it was for a turn, like, that'd be good, maybe. But, like, just for 2 to 4 attacks, like, oh, man, I don't know.
Yeah, and then Swift Strikes, the class skill is really good. But in late game Deity, you're not doubling, and your speeds are going to be matching the enemy speeds for the most part, if not barely higher. And so you're probably not even getting those follow-up attacks in the first place.
Yeah.
And so this is a wildly inconsistent skill too. What I will argue for the Tempest class, it does have an absolutely bonkers ability in Swift Winds. Swift Winds is incredible.
Yeah.
Like it's 2 movement to adjacent allies for a turn, I think, initially. And you can upgrade it to be 3 movement for 2 turns. And so you can open up with this ability and give your allies +3 movement. That's like 1.5 times what they can move, even more. That's an extra 60% movement buff. They are going to move 8 tiles, and you can buff up to 4 units with this. And you can do it more than once. You can buff up your entire team if you dance and then position it, to buff up all your units. So I think that buff on its own absolutely buys it out of C. 100%. Like, it gets it towards the higher part of B if you sort of calm down and realize that this class is not going to do what you want it to do, it's not going to be a crit killing machine, it's not going to be a dodge tank. This class is a support class, unfortunately. And it's confused as to what it wants to do. Does it want to debuff? Does it want to buff? Does it want to crit? Does it want to do magical and physical damage? Does it, it's just all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I would be willing to put it into the middle or the top of B purely because of Swift Winds, because that skill is so good and there's nothing like it in the game.
Yeah, the make your entire team paladins like cavalry is kind of an insane option for sure. So yeah, I would say it definitely deserves to be somewhere in B just for that. Like I would be happy to include a Tempest just for that ability. And like they can do combat. They can fight. They can help to like pick off enemies and things like that after they've done their big speed boost. But I do hear what you're saying for sure. It's odd that there's not a single damage ability on the whole class, right? Like, is that not weird? Is that not strange?
Yeah, it is. It is
like,
very odd.
That's always struck me as weird. And again, like Mashal for me as a Tempest was doing enough damage in melee that it didn't matter for me on Deity. But like, you would think there'd be something. Like even just like a kind of like with Relic Knight, like a triggerable pseudo Astra effect or something like that would be huge, but it's just not there, and it's weird.
I had her in this class too on my Deity playthrough, and I kept her just because I like her in my party until the very end game, and I put this Y-hander on her, and I went full crit mode, and I tried and tried and tried, but at the end of the day, she ended up just becoming a Swift Winds buffer. That's just how this class operates, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I mean, I will advocate for a little bit more positivity in terms of its general damage output, but for overall like meta strat stuff, yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. So, where would you like it in B tier? Because I do agree with you on that.
I don't know. I mean, I would honestly put it at the top of B tier. The movement is just a game changer for me. It's so good. It's so good.
Cool. I agree with that. Absolutely. That's kind of around where I was thinking as well. So I'm happy to go with that. And hey, a whole bump up a tier from the second tier version. So not too shabby.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Tell us about your Chain Lightning bot.
Okay. This is a class that I did not use in Deity at all. And now that I'm playing Demonic, I'm starting to come to terms with the fact that Conduit's actually a pretty good class. The growths on it are very well optimized. You're getting that 30% might and 35% mastery, which is letting you hit hard and let your abilities do a lot of damage and a lot of utility. This class has Chain Lightning, which is one of the better skills in the game. It does exactly what most skills want to do. It is consistent and it chains. It doesn't hit a specific formulation. And so as long as there's an enemy within 2 range of where the previous lightning shot hit, you will hit it. It does guaranteed damage that scales according to your mastery. And would you look at that? It's got that 30% mastery growth that you really, 35%, sorry, that you really want. And the high might growth means that you can also just scale that up a little bit too. So in addition to that, you get Flux Overload, which increases your crit by 6 every time you use mana. Now, this is actually bigger than you think it is because you're going to be using Chain Lightning, you're going to be using Defibrillate, and your allies are also going to be using it within 2 tiles. So a lot of times I'll have been using my skills, and then when I run out of mana and it's time for me to attack, my crit is like 70%. And I was like, wow, okay, well, this is an unexpected nice boost. With my high might, I'm doing some big nuke damage while I regenerate my own mana. So it is a very synergistic class. And Defibrillate is not a skill that you're going to use very often, but if your allies are very weak and they're low health, this is a panic button. It heals for an immense amount. And if you do it right, you're never going to have to suffer the light stun drawback. So I actually really like this class. And on Demonic, it really does help you deal with those large swaths of enemies. I think this is definitely or absolutely an A tier class.
I would absolutely agree with that. I've had Defibrillate save my bacon a number of times. I really enjoy it. Like, there's even been times where I've just eaten the stun just to get that big heal on, like, a down turn while I'm getting mana back or, like, running up to a boss or something like that. Absolutely phenomenal for that. And then, yeah, I mean, the Chain Lightning, you just can't go wrong with that. Direct damage, I've been crowing it from the rafters. It's a phenomenal mechanic, and this is just a good way to go about dealing that damage. And of all of the different pseudo mage classes, like obviously this is an adept class, but it's an adept class that feels like a mage class. It's got great single target damage too, like you were saying, especially with the crit boost. Like you can just be, lightning, Emperor Palpatining all over the place, and then just dropping one giant bomb on someone. It just feels great to play. It's got a good gameplay loop, and you don't feel like you're going out of your way to make something happen, which we cannot say for all these classes. So definitely,
yeah, it just clicks. It feels right. It does what it's supposed to do, and that's what I love about classes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm thinking pretty high in A, right?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
Like maybe just like below Tamer or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
And now the big upgrade itself. How you feeling about this one here?
Stormkeeper, again, does exactly what it's supposed to do. It boosts up your might growth a little bit. It boosts up your mastery to 40%. It's like they're doing everything right here. The skills, just straight upgrade, right? We had Chain Lightning. Now we've got Lightning Strike. Now this one is a 5-tile cross, which is a pretty big AoE.
Yeah.
And it deals 40 damage, which is guaranteed damage, and you can strike from pretty far away. So I just want to take a look at the upgrades real quick before I talk about this. So with Lightning Strike, you can also increase the range, so you go up to 7 range, and you can heal allies within that area of effect, similar to what Cosmission was doing. So it's nice. You can also reduce the mana cost, and you can apply Heavy Snare, which slows down enemies coming towards you. And this is one of the few skills that does that at range. This is really valuable. If you've got a big group of enemies that you need to chunk down and slow down so that you can mow them down... This is a great skill. I love it. And it's not too mana expensive either. It's 55. It's just a little bit higher than Chain Lightning was. Storm Rider is the other ability, which reduces movement costs in a 6-tile line. Now, I haven't tested this, but is this reducing movement costs over terrain specifically, or does this just double the movement of all of your allies?
From what I've been able to figure out, I think it just is changing it so you don't take movement penalties for terrain. I'm pretty sure. Now, granted, the one time I actually had the opportunity to test this was on a particular map where you have like the rainbow roads that already double your movement. So it was a little hard to figure out what I was getting from where as I was going through. But from what I've been able to test, I think it does just make it so you don't get hampered by terrain.
That's honestly what makes sense. And if that's the case, it's not really a great skill, and you're probably just going to be lightning striking or chain lightning most of the time with that high mastery. And obliteration is a nice skill. Like overkill damage, restoring mana, and letting you use more abilities is very nice. I don't know exactly how much it restores. We don't really have a description of how much it restores, but I'm assuming it's like a 1-to-1 ratio of sorts.
Yeah, that's usually how most of these abilities have been. And I'm sorry I started giggling there, but just the matter-of-factness of obliteration is a pretty nice skill to have. Just like, obliterating my enemies is, a pretty good thing to have. just
kind of on brand for me,
I loved it. That was great. That was very, very funny. So yeah, I mean, changing of movement costs aside, I think this is definitely a phenomenal upgrade for the class. Do you think also A tier? What are you feeling with this one? Because I think it just adds benefits, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's enough to take it to S tier. I think it just keeps it in that, A tier. Kind of, how the... which ones did we have that were back-to-back at A tier? Did we have any? We didn't.
We had back-to-back S tier with Aegis and Relic Knight.
Yeah. No, I think this just keeps it in A tier, sort of where it is. It's an enhancement. It's a good, solid class. It's not broken, but it just does the job that it's supposed to do so well.
Yeah, it's not Warden. It's not losing something in the process of promoting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm totally down with that. It's a super dope class. I really, really enjoy it. And just the whole, I mean, not a numbers thing, but the Lightning Mage aesthetic is always a good choice. So,
absolutely.
All right. Now, I think we both have similar feelings about this one, and it ain't great. Fragilin into Godfrost. Godfrost is definitely going to fare better, I would say. Fragilin this is a weird class, man. This is a very strange class. This is kind of supposed to be your tanky Adept, although another class we'll talk about here soon definitely does the job better thanks to a certain ability. But I'm not going to lie. There's nothing about the way Dark Deity functions that makes me crave a blocker, like an obstacle, right? Like... Yeah. I see the Icy Pillar ability that Fragilin has, and I immediately think of Obstruct Staves and Engage, right? But those were super useful. because the maps were more open. There was more choke points. It was a staff that you could put on any staff user. It wasn't one of 2 abilities that you had on a class. And then you had different ways you could like make it a bigger area or target further distance away, whatever, on typically classes that didn't really want to be in the melee anyway. Fragilin does. Fragilin is your tank. So more likely than not, you want it to be standing and trading blows with the enemy. And to facilitate that, you have the ability to give yourself some block, and the passive skill gives you, I think it's block and accuracy, or is it power and accuracy or something?
It's power and accuracy.
Power and accuracy, yeah. So you're going to hit harder if you have block on, so you want to be fighting. The issue is that the way block works, after 1, maybe 2 hits, your block's going to be gone. So now not only are you taking more damage, but you're also less likely to hit because you're using axes, which do have lower accuracy, and you're also dealing less damage in response. So to have your tank be functioning at max capacity, you want to be pumping block into it through other sources than just its own ability, which doesn't really feel great. Like, yeah, your tank is going to need some support, but you want to be able to put him in a choke point and hold the line while the rest of your team does other stuff. Fragilin wants to be stuck in the front of the line and have everyone be feeding it so that it can keep doing single target damage. Like, and then the growths are weird. I don't like this class, man. I know where I want to put it, and I feel like it might be the same as you, but you tell me your thoughts, because...
I'm going to try and save this class.
Okay,
but
go for it.
I don't think I will successfully be able to save it. Fragilin is a class that I just feel like is odd, and I think a lot of the tank classes that they've created in Dark Deity 2 suffer from similar problems in that they don't particularly tank well. And that's important for a tank class. Like the Fragilin class has a 30% defense growth, which is respectable, but then a 10% fortitude class. And most of the people in this tier have low fortitude growths to begin with in this group. And so you're not saving it. You're making it purely a physical tank. It's got great HP growths and great might growths, which, great, you let them hit back. But the fact that it needs assistance from a continuous blocker, and then you're also going to need it to continuously increase its defense and fortitude to even take less damage in the first place, is not great. So Fragilin on its own, it's just a bad class. Now, Icy Spire, I've made a couple uses out of Icy Spire, like the chapter that you get Zuhair in, the one where you're throwing the drinks all around. There are a lot of choke points, so it was very useful to just put down Icy Spire in one of those choke points and not have to worry about enemies coming through there. There's some fringe use cases for it. I think chapter 10, the one after it, where you're getting really swamped by a lot of enemies coming at you really fast, you can put down an Icy Spire to block one of those lanes, can be pretty useful. But like, I agree with you, in the grand scheme of things, there's not many places I would want to put Icy Spire. And I don't know how much I would want to use Defensive Stance, because it's an expensive skill. And, you know, you can upgrade it to reduce the mana cost down to 35% or increase the number of stacks. And it is severe block, so it'll stick around for 3 attacks. But after those 3 attacks, it's gone. And 3 attacks, you're getting doubled. So it's like 1 attack, 2 attack. And then if you're getting doubled again, it's like 1 attack. And then the second one, bye-bye.
Yep.
So it's like really only 1 to 2 rounds of combat that it's lasting for. So I'm mixed on the Fragilin. I feel like you want to put it in D tier, and honestly, I'm kind of inclined to agree.
Boom, let's go! I've been waiting for it. Yes, let's go. Dumpster tier for Fragilin, unfortunately. It's a really cool class idea. You know, I really like the whole ice armor, like tanky axe wielder type thing. Yeah, I just don't think it's executed well in terms of what it wants to do, primarily because of the way block works. If block fell off in a different way, then it could probably be a lot better. But being so reliant on block, not just to be tanky, but also to really maximize your damage output, just is a major feels bad to me. So
yeah.
Now, the next one, bit more positive, I would say. The tanky man himself, Godfrost. I mean, the big one here is just being able to dump your mana into massively roiding out your defensive stats, right? I don't know exactly what the baseline is, but it's like plus 14 defense and fortitude or something like that, right?
It's much less than that. It's scales based on your mastery, and I'll talk about it in a
Oh,
little
yeah,
bit, but
yeah.
it can be as low as like 8 or 9, so it's not that crazy.
But I mean, even then, that is a not insubstantial boost. And then if you can get it even higher, then well, okay, now maybe we're talking about something. But the thing that bugs me about Godfrost is, like, yeah, you can get yourself all of this tankiness towards what end, right? Like, at least if you've got like an uber tanky character like a Relic Knight, if they're using their reflection and their repulsor shield, they're clapping back really hard. Not happening as much with I almost said God Hand, Godfrost. And while it's nice to be able to just tank up and laugh as things hit you, and it can be really good if you do that and then have a Relic Knight put repulsor shield on you and then you start reflecting, that's a whole different story. But that's not a benefit of the job in and of itself. So it's not a bad tank class. I certainly think it's better than stuff like Warden, so I think it gets to at least B tier, but it feels like there's a little bit of like special sauce that it's missing. So what are your thoughts on it?
So this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I think Godfrost has the potential to be the best tank class in the entire game. And here's why. I felt pretty bad about it until I started looking at the numbers. And the one thing I did was I grabbed my endgame Saxon and I side-swapped him from Ascendant into Godfrost to just take a look at how things would look like stat-wise.
Okay.
And of course, it's unfair to compare like speed and dex and all that stuff. But the one stat that really stands out is Mastery. And I think what you need to do to make this class good is be in Conduit and then side grade into Fragilin and down into Godfrost if you want a strong tank. Because you definitely don't want Flux Overload. You do want Defensive Fighter with Godfrost. The issue with it is entirely dependent on having support. You're going to need 2 supporters to make this the most broken class in the game. You're going to need an Aegis to put on Reflector Shield for this. And you're absolutely going to need Viserion specifically to give you that personal buff of plus 12.
Yeah. Fair.
Now, with mid-20s Mastery, Absolute Zero, which is your bread and butter skill, that's all you're going to use in this class. It's all you have the mana for. With mid-20s, you're getting 15 defense and fortitude for 2 turns, which is a lot. It's significant. At least in the defense department, less so in the fortitude because this has garbage fortitude growth. But hopefully if you're in Conduit, you'll have a little bit more. After that, what you're going to do is you're going to stack on Viserion's buff. And then you're going to give it block from something. And so now it's going to do damage. It's going to have crazy high defenses and fortitude. And this will last, the Absolute Zero can be upgraded to last for 2 turns. And then if you upgrade the Mastery scaling for it, now I'm getting 21 defense and fortitude. So 21 defense and fortitude from Absolute Zero, plus 12 from Viserion, or even more depending on the scaling. That's about 33. And you add on heavy block. I think that's pretty damn good. With the caveat that you're going all in on this class.
Correct.
You have 2 dedicated buffers specifically to this class. And then once those 3 turns are over, your Absolute Zero is gone.
Yeah.
So you gotta figure shit out. You gotta funnel some mana into it. You gotta do something.
Yep.
Now, the ring potential with this is good. I know there's a bunch of skills that can like increase defense and fortitude combined. I think the highest boost you can get is like 9. So add another 9 onto that 33 and you're getting like plus 41 to whatever your bases are. It can get disgustingly tanky up there, specifically because of Absolute Zero. So I wouldn't completely write off Godfrost. I had to really look into it a little bit more. But I agree. Everything else about Fragilin and Godfrost is garbage. You're going to have to just dedicate your entire existence to this class. And purely because of that, I would not put it any higher than B tier. It can be the best tank class in the game, but it's just going to require obnoxious amounts of support. And that's really all there is to it.
Yeah, yeah. And, once you're at that point, it's like, okay, is it even really the best tank class at that point? Because it's draining so many resources off of the rest of your party. Like, in terms of pure numbers, sure. But, like, what's the knock-on effect from that, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, that said, I think, yeah, even without going whole hog on all of that, it can just take hits like a champ. So, it fills that role, again, certainly better than something like Warden. So, I'd be comfortable putting it right above Ranger in B if that works for you.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
All right, cool. Yeah, definitely an interesting one. And, more power to you for doing the deep dive on that, because I just had kind of already written this class off and wouldn't have cared to. So well done on that. Absolutely.
Again, I've been doing my Oops All Tanks playthrough, and I'm just trying to figure out, like, there's got to be more to these tanks than just being garbage units. And there is, but it just takes a lot more effort.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, speaking of effort, I think it's my turn anyways, but the
this
most
one's
low
all
effort,
you, brother, all you. Have at
the most low effort broken classes in this game is probably Monk into Ascendant. I mean,
Yep.
You want to talk about Monk? I mean, just look at the growths that Monk gives you. It is 20% HP, 15% might, 25% speed, 30% dex, and you get 10 defense and 20 fortitude. So it's not even bad defensively either.
Mm-hmm.
And it's speed-wise it's high, and dex-wise it's high. Might-wise it's a little bit on the low end, but there's a little bit of a class skill called Nerve Strike, which applies 5 heavy weak stacks. So if you don't kill the enemy, there you go. It's going to be, they're not going to hit you anymore. And there's a pretty busted ability called Charged Key. Charged Key just flat raises your advanced stats, so your power, accuracy, dodge, crit, and speed, by it starts at a base of 8 or something ludicrous like that, which in the early game, you're doubling everything, even on Demonic.
Yep.
I've been testing this. Monk is cracked even on Demonic.
Insane.
It just is. It does so much power. The focus weapon that you get, the Fractile Prism early on, is a high crit weapon that, you can just have your Monk always raising your crit here by 8, and then the Fractile Prism can get up to 45, so you're always above 50% crit on every enemy. You will mow through enemies. The only drawback is you'll suffer from success sometimes, where you'll kill too many things and then you die. In the Monk class, at least. When we get to Ascendant, it's a different story, but in the Monk class, at least. This is, by far and away, the top of S tier.
Sounds good to me. Even above the tier 3s that we have up there, you think?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, because the early game utility of it is just so good. Dude, Ascendant, this is just put it up there. Just put it up there.
Yep.
Just put it up there.
Most broken
this
class
is
in the game.
This
Easy.
is the most broken class in the game.
Easy.
It is the top of the top. I have an entire build video dedicated to Ascendant, because when you use Divine Flow, you just become invincible. It's impossible to hit for 7 attacks. You're not going to get doubled. So that is 7 rounds of combat. And then you get the ability to buff that up further with your ability upgrades. You can upgrade the mastery scaling by about 10%, and that'll give you another 3, up to 10 or 11 attacks sometimes. You can also reduce the mana cost from 100 to 85. And the way I play it is I give that ring that gives you just a flat 250 mana to start. And then there's another ring that recovers 5 mana per combat, because you're going to be doing a shit ton of combats with this class. It gets very self-sufficient. Divine Flow will last for a while. Mm-hmm. It's not turn-based. It's just specifically attack-based. So you might sometimes have it up for 2, maybe 3 turns sometimes, because you're not always facing those 7 enemies or 8 enemies or 10 enemies in one turn. And just add on to that Charged Key, you're dodging everything. You're just ripping everything to shreds. I think the only thing that nerfs this class is the fact that it's not 1-2 range. I mean, give it 2 range and it's GG. It's game over.
Oh no, it just starts throwing Hadoukens around all over the place. Just oh no. Yeah, if that was actually the case, then I would have been petitioning the team, you guys need to make this a 1-range class. This cannot persist. It's too strong as it is.
Honestly, I think Ascendant just deserves a tier on its own. It just needs to be up there in SS tier by itself. If we had an SS tier, yeah, it's just above everything else in terms of how good it is.
Can I add one while we're live? Oh my god,
you can add row above.
Oh baby, it's oh god, where'd it go? This is just Ascendant.
Just have to hit add row above. Yeah, there we go.
No,
it's there.
Oh, why is there 2?
Oh, God. It messed it up.
Oh no, delete row.
Edit the name. No, keep it. Just change the name.
Oh no, because that's S. Oh, everything's gone wrong. Why did it go away? That's Blooper Town. Why does it keep going away? We are in Blooper Town now. All right, add a row above. There we go. There we go. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. It doesn't fit, but that's fine. It gets to go up there on its own anyway.
That's okay.
Okay.
It ascended so much it can't even fit.
Yep, exactly. Its just brain is too large. Oh, that was a little dose of chaos that we needed near the tail end of this. That was good. All right.
Yep.
Whew. So yeah, Ascendant is just unquestionable. I mean, do you think if you want to be meta about it and you're trying to roll demonic, do you just make every Adept Ascendant? Like, is that just the way to go? Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely. You just have 4 invincible units. Now, the only thing is you can only have one of that 250 mana ring. And so it gets a little bit tricky in where you have to cast your Divine Flow in sort of the range of a Lore Master or 2 if that stacks. And then you have to wait a little bit to regen to get the charged key. So it's not as consistent. You can only make one really, truly broken Ascendant. So you take your best one, which unfortunately is Taldera. But, I'll save that for the other video, my rant on Taldera.
Yeah, I mean...
But, yeah.
4 Lore Masters, 4 Ascendant, just as mana batteries for the Ascendants, and just yeet. Like,
yeah.
I could see it. I could absolutely see it.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we're not in anywhere near the same tier of power with this one coming up, but it is still a fun class. We're moving into what I'm calling the Druid tier of classes, the Druid tree. And there's definitely some fun stuff here, and definitely still some powerful stuff too. Can't just knock everything because it's not Ascendant. So starting off with Juggernaut. This is the tank of this group, and it's not bad. It's not terrible. I definitely enjoy this one. I don't think it's definitely not the best class around by any means, but I do think it's actually pretty decent. The kind of idea of not even just a reprisal tank, because that's what Aegis is for, but a berserker barbarian tank, where you want to take a bunch of hits, you want to take all the bleed effects and the poisons and everything, use that to heal yourself, and then burn enemies with your fire as a sort of reprisal thing. This is definitely an interesting one. So something that I really like about this class in general, it does get pretty decent defensive growths, but the fact that Wreathed in Flame doesn't fade. It's the same thing as Divine Flow in that regard. It's only based on you getting hit. So you can just stack up a ludicrous amount of stacks of this ability that just makes an enemy, I think at base it's either 6 or 8 damage they take per stack when they attack you, or just when they fight you. And then you just walk up to a boss and just watch them delete themselves on you.
Yep.
Just gone. And then along the way you can just be doing whatever, smacking stuff if you want, or just hanging back and waiting for your big opportunity. So as a defensive class, it's not the strongest tank in the game, but it can hold the line and deal some damage as a result. So I do enjoy it for that. It's probably my second favorite tank after Aegis and Relic Knight. It's just fun. So I would say is it as effective as Ranger in pure tankiness? No. But I do think it has more killing potential with the Wreathed in Flames, and that makes me want to put it a little bit higher just because of map clear. But you tell me, what do you think?
Yeah, so this is one that I've been experimenting on in my demonic run currently. I'm going all in on Juggernaut, Dreadnought, Kamari, because let's be real, he's the only one that really makes use of this class very well. His growths are catered to it. This class is optimized for Kamari, which sucks, but that's how it is. And yeah, you were right. It's basically designed to be hit and dish out the damage back with Wreathed in Flame, and you can stack it with Reflector Shield, which makes that really, really fun. That's the combo I've been running. The problem with this class is it doesn't have anything to add bulk to it.
Yeah.
So you're completely contingent upon buffers or rings. So, the bases and the growths are high, but you have no bulk, and that continues on into the next segment. Spoiler alert. It's good at regenerating mana with pain absorption, but if you're not able to tank very well and the speed growth is so poor that you're always going to get doubled, this one's kind of a borderline sometimes. The most I'm able to tank on demonic is 2 or 3 enemies at once, and then I'm kind of at my limit for the most part, unless I'm buffed up. So I don't know. I've got kind of mixed feelings on this one. I feel like Ranger is probably a better out and out tank, to be honest with you, but then this one has good fortitude growth, so it's kind of as a more complete tank, it might be this one, and the damage potential is higher, so I don't really know. I'd be okay with you putting it anywhere you want in B tier, honestly.
Okay, fair. For just raw tankiness, I certainly don't think it beats Godfrost, so I wouldn't put it above that. Even disregarding the fact that it's a tier 2 versus a tier 3 with that discussion. It's interesting. I'm very curious to see how the discussion around tanks evolves, specifically in demonic, because it is pretty tough to just sit and hold the line, no matter what you're doing. Like even my Aegis Alden up through chapter 7 or 8 or wherever I'm at in demonic right now, like he can't hold the line forever. You do need some buffs and some support, and I do think that's healthy for the game. Not just being able to put a powerhouse unit down until you get to Ascendant and just be like, all right, well, that's this lane blocked, I'm good. And so I think that's where things like Juggernaut can potentially be nice, because with the right support, they can kind of help you just clear lanes, especially if you're doing the repulsor shield thing. So I like it a little bit more than Ranger in that regard, where it's like, all right, I tanked. Now what? Now I'm surrounded and like, hope I have a Geomancer nearby, I guess. So I like it a little bit more. It's definitely a kind of middling tank, but it's not terrible. Definitely better than Fragilin.
You know what the real issue is? And I feel like this is something we probably should have touched on way earlier. But the main problem is, if you look at weapons and the runes, there are very few defensive options for runes. Like, you can stack blind and weakness on some of them, but there's none of the runes that give you, like, how you get +3 power? Why can't we just get, like, +2 defensive fortitude or +3 defensive fortitude? Like, let me have my pure tank. There's nothing that gives me, like, straight up HP. And I'm rolling through all of my axe options here, and the only one that I see with a defensive option, and I might have missed some of the more unique ones along the way, but the only one that even has a, like, even close to a defensive option is the base axe that gives you overflow, which stores 10% of damage dealt as light block. That's it. Nothing else really gives you any defensive options. I think the splitter lets you have vampire, which heals you for 5 each, but you're not doubling in this class for 5 for every hit. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's one thing that we probably would have needed, is more defensive options on the weapons, honestly. And even the rings aren't terribly great.
No, I do agree with that, and it also kind of would have been nice to have just out-and-out defensive weapons, period. Like, over just runes. I think of the, I don't know if you are like a FromSoft, Elden Ring, Dark Souls type of guy, but in the Shadows of the Erdtree expansion for Elden Ring, there was like a piercing shield that you could get. That was like a long, narrow shield that you could block with, parry, all that type of stuff. But it also had bladed edges on either side, so you could kind of like poke stuff with it like a spear. It would be cool to see even just like 1 or 2 options like that maybe have other drawbacks, but that would be just defensive boosts for some of the tank classes, right? Or maybe there's just weapons that are kind of like that idea, that then the runes are the defensive boosts or something. Because yeah, you're right. I hadn't really thought about that, but you get all these offense toys to play with. And that's fair. If the game is about just pushing forward and not turtling up, then fair enough if that's what they want. But you do have these tank options. Give us some more modifiers for them. I do agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. So
justice for tanks.
Justice for tanks, man. Look at the Dreadnought out here. Like, look at how cool that class looks. Look at this thing. It's got all this bone armor and like spikes and horns and all this type of stuff. It literally can always hit, but always gets hit. It's a cool class. Let us build into it a little bit more. That said, though, Dreadnought is definitely an interesting one. I like the idea of just being like, no, you always hit me, and then I always hit you. We go like blow for blow, punch for punch. Let's see who comes out on top. And again, like between this and Necromancer, this is basically just put the two together and you have my favorite D&D character I've ever played. But just the idea of being like, all right, my turn, and just being able to take all the damage that they've dealt to you and turn it into damage to them, potentially after you've already stacked up Wreathed in Flame and dealt damage to them that way. It is really fun. But what's weird about Dreadnought is because of that ability, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now. But
Bloodstroke.
Yeah, Bloodstroke. Like, it kind of, between the passive and that, makes it feel like you've transitioned out of a tank role into something that is supposed to be more of a damage role. And that's fine, but if you went through Juggernaut first, then you might not necessarily have the stats or the other abilities that you really want for that. So it's a little bit of a weird one, even though conceptually I like it. So what do you think about Dreadnought here?
Dreadnought's funny because it feels like this class is meant for you to go into from Ritualist, actually. Ritualist in a Dreadnought gives you sort of the transfusion, blood, absorb kind of deal. And then Dreadnought gives you a little bit more extra tankiness, but you might not necessarily double. You'll probably be able to like sustain yourself a little bit better, and then Bloodstroke makes sense. Now, the never misses but cannot dodge doesn't even matter because you're healing off of your damage anyways from what Ritualist was doing.
Right.
But the thing with Dreadnought is the Dread Blessing skill that it gets that gives you a shit ton of light block stacks is kind of weird because you can self-cast it, which is good with one of the upgrades, but it's just not that good.
Yeah.
It's just really like 33 light block, and then the ability Relentless not really giving you anything to help you tank is also kind of weird. It feels like this is, again, like you said, a bruiser that is trying to like be a jack of all trades in a way. And then Bloodstroke is the damage is increased by 1 for every missing 5 HP on the enemies. Like that's kind of counterproductive, right? Because if the enemy's halfway dead, let's say they're missing 30 HP, that's only 6 extra damage with the 12 that you're doing. So it's really not that great.
But is it? Maybe I'm misremembering. I thought it was the amount of HP you were missing.
Oh, right. Same amount of HP you're missing.
Okay.
But even then, like how much HP do you have?
Well,
Are you down by 50%? Like you're going to get like 10 extra damage. How good is 10 extra damage?
Now,
it's good, but it's not crazy.
That said, there is a pretty nice upgrade. I don't remember what the exact thresholds are, but there is a pretty decent upgrade for that makes it much better in terms of damage scaling from what I remember.
You can -1 them twice, so
Yeah.
You'll get 3.
Yeah.
So it does make it a little bit better. You're right. But again, would I be in a tank role? Would I even have the mana to use this? Yeah, you recover mana when you do damage, so it might be a good recovery class. And I'm testing this build out, so I'll be committed to it and we'll see how it does. But it feels like I would have, again, like with most of the other tank class, rathered something that could tank better in a way. Or maybe give them some lifesteal.
Yeah. Well, and again, if you go through Ritualist to do that, then there you go. You kind of have fixed it in that way. Yeah, it's definitely, it's interesting. I kind of like Dreadnought more because it feels like it does have the class identity of like, it started life as a tank when it was more basic and it had fewer abilities, but once it could flesh out its range of abilities more, it transitions out of that role into a new role. And you can kind of see the vision with that. So if it doesn't want to be a tank by the time it gets to Dreadnought, then, you know, fair enough. Especially if like you're on a subsequent playthrough of the game and you kind of know how these things work, you can plan for that and then take it through something like Ritualist that's going to lean into that more. And I think I have a very fun time with it. But I think it's a class that requires a little bit of prior knowledge about the game and the foresight to plan for it not actually ending as a tank class. You know, if you go in, you're like, Kamari's got really good defensive stats. Like on your first run through, like, I'm going to switch him to Dreadnought instead and use him as a tank. And then he becomes less and less like a tank over time. You're going to be like, what the hell is this? But if you can plan for it instead, I do think it has a lot of potential in that regard.
Honestly, you know what the play might be? The play might actually be giving up Wreathed in Flame. And it's painful, but it might be level up in the Juggernaut class up to 25, side switch into Ritualist to get Transfusion, but also Hex, because you apply 18 heavy weak stacks.
Yeah.
So that actually lets you tank better. And Blood Mage lets you absorb HP so you tank better there. And then you re-upgrade into Dreadnought because now you never miss. And you still keep all of the levels that you got with the growths that you got. But now you have some extra utility from Ritualist into Dreadnought. Yeah. That might honestly be the play, and I'll try that out.
Yeah, I do like that idea a lot. Like, I think this is going to be a game where, because there's so much utility in all the different classes, so much of their overall functionality is going to come from what growths that you got over time. So yeah, I think if you do some tricky stuff with like leveling in one class and then switching to another before you promote, you could actually get some pretty nutty combinations going on if you really want to start min-maxing it. So yeah, that might work. Absolutely.
There's another combo that I also just noticed. Elementalist has Ice Shield, which you can self-cast. It gives you a heavy block. So you could do that and then go into Dreadnought.
Yeah. I think if you want to really make like a more effective tanky Dreadnought, then yeah, you don't want the Juggernaut skills. You want the Juggernaut growths for sure. But yeah, I think there's some potential there. And I do think that maybe the devs thought of that because you get so many Astral Coins. Yeah. Like, even before you start buying them from the shop, you get so many for reclass options. You do have the chance to do like sort of growth shenanigans with a few different characters. So yeah, absolutely.
That was a good discussion. I like that.
Yeah, that was awesome. We never decided where Dreadnought goes.
Given the fact that there's so much flexibility in what you do going into Dreadnought, I feel like we just kind of popped it a little bit higher because of the flexibility of going into it from Elementalist, going into it from Ritualist, or staying in the Juggernaut. I think it's definitely still in B tier, but I really want to see the potential of this. This one might rise to the bottom of A, depending on how well the builds go.
All right. So say maybe top of B then for now?
Yeah, I think it's more of like a damage-oriented version of Godfrost. Godfrost is pure tank. This one is more damage-oriented. I think that's fair.
Definitely. And that's something that I like to see with the tanks in this as well. Like, each one does feel like it has a different niche that it's trying to fulfill. And, like, rather than just being like, well, this one is tanky, but in a different way. But, like, this one, like, can tank, but also wants to deal damage. Or, like, can tank, but reflects damage. Or, like, different stuff like that is cool. I do enjoy that. And finding the little niche ways to make them really maximize in that role is a fun time, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But we only have 6 left. And thank goodness, because we're coming up very quickly on 2.5 hours here with this recording. So...
Oh, my God.
Why don't you tell us about Elementalists, sir?
I think we're on Waveseer. Oh, we're out of order a little bit. That's fine. Yeah, I could talk about Elementalist.
I got them in the wrong order. My apologies.
No, that's okay. Do you want to do Waveseer or Elementalist?
I will just go with Elementalist because it's what we have right here, if you're good with that.
Sure. So, Elementalist is actually a class that I haven't really used much. So, it's an interesting class. The growths that it has are very nicely specialized. It's got 30% might and 30% mastery, which let it do what it really wants to do, which is do some big damage hits with Flame Strike, or, give you more heavy blocks with Ice Shield. That's kind of what this class wants to do. It's like this combo of support, but also ability-heavy class. And Invoke Spirits is a nice ability that goes along with it that increases its power by 4 after ability use until next combat. Now, the one thing that I'm not sure about is, does this power increase stack multiple times? So if I Ice Shield twice, is that 8 power that I have in my next combat when I go and hit? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe you can correct me on that one. But
I think
as a
it
class,
is. I think
it is? Okay, that makes it really nice, because then you can hit with some big nukes while you try and regenerate your mana.
Mm-hmm.
The only concern I have with Elementalist is its ability to upkeep its mana costs. And Flame Strike you can reduce down to 60 mana, which is decent, and Ice Shield can go down to 35%, or 35 mana, which is good. But again, after your mana is out, then what do you do with Elementalist? It's like, it's a decent class, but I don't know if it's amazing at base.
It's a very mana hungry class for sure. But in trade-off for that, the effects that you get from it are really good. Like, in terms of just raw damage capability, Flame Strike has the same AoE as the upgraded Conduit, that's name I can't remember because we've been at this for
Stormcaller?
hours. Yeah, Stormcaller. Like, it's the same AoE as the damage ability from Stormcaller, but in a tier 2 class. It's not going to be quite the same damage output or range, but, like, still, that's pretty damn good. So having that be so pricey does make sense. And then being able to just say, you tank, this is a big turn, take 8 heavy block is like, damn, all right. And then you can then come in and step 2 and do some pretty good damage with your basic attack as well, especially if you've been stacking up a lot of mana usage. So I think if the main limiting factor of the class is its general mana hungriness, that's fine. Like, that's a fair trade-off for the pretty big effect that you can get. And the gameplay loop of being like, okay, yeah, you take a turn or two, and you just do your normal, like, basic attacks, right? Because you got the boost, and, like, you're letting your mana come back. That's fine. I think that's perfectly reasonable. And there's plenty of classes in the game that are just happy to have a Scholar along for the mana regeneration there. So I like it. I definitely think it is one of the more powerful tier 2 classes in terms of just like raw damage and stats. So I would say it's probably pretty high in B tier. If it wasn't so mana hungry, I'd say A tier, but like, it just does too much to not be in high B, in my opinion.
I feel like it would be fair to put it somewhat on a similar level to like Warlock and Nightblade. I feel like that's a decent spot for it.
That's exactly what I was eyeing the whole time. We'll put it smack dab in the middle of them for sure. So very nice, very nice. So I imagine you probably haven't used Spirit Seer that much then either, if you haven't used Elementalist.
I have not, but I actually like Spirit Keeper a lot.
Okay.
because again, the growths are concordant. I know I always reference growths, but it's like it's good
They're
to
important.
see the tracking, right? The mastery goes up, the might goes up, the HP goes down a little bit, but it continues to do what it's supposed to do very well, which is also being extremely mana hungry, right?
Yes,
you've
yes,
got-
absolutely.
Resurrection is a really nice skill, but I think they also forgot that on demonic, this is useless. So like
Yeah.
it has a dead skill here.
This is a deity
And
only
I think-
class.
Yeah, this is a deity only class, and you know, in their defense, demonic wasn't a thing until very late into the development cycle where the classes were already done. So it might have been a little bit of an oversight. Maybe they need to swap out this skill, but this is a dead skill on demonic, unfortunately, which hurts this class immensely. Spirit Bomb is really fun. It is very expensive, but it is very, very fun. And you do have the option to upgrade it to increase its range, to allow it to heal in the AoE, sort of similar to that Cosmission thing we did, to reduce the mana cost immensely by 25, which I would honestly recommend.
Yeah, it's huge.
Or to let it lifesteal for you. So all of its upgrades are phenomenal. It has some really, really fun upgrades, which make this skill extremely fun. I would honestly take the 25 mana reduction to let me cast it at 55 and then just
easily.
spam Spirit Bombs.
Yeah.
That's so much fun.
Yeah.
And then Soul Synergy, the class skill is really, really good. Like combat increases effective next ability by 25%. This is like you're swapping between it based on elementalists. So you're casting an ability, you're getting power increase during combat. You're attacking, then you're getting an ability increase for the next one, etc., etc., etc. And if this also stacks, that's kind of bonkers.
I have done some truly horrifying stuff with this class tree. And yeah, this is definitely one of the ones where you're like, yeah, oh, you know, maybe you want to go into Dreadnought from something else. Like, no, you want to go Elementalist, Spirit Seeker, Spirit Keeper. I can never remember the difference. You want to do that because they are two halves of the same kit, bar none. And once you can get that gameplay loop going, it is so much fun to do. You know, I have actually used Lurai in this set for my entirety of my deity run. I'm planning on doing it again on demonic. It is very powerful, and really the only thing it needs is some dedicated either like mana cost reduction through Scholar and Lore Master, or just a mana battery through a Scholar, and you can do some nasty stuff like that. Reduced mana Spirit Bomb. Ooh, oh, it's so good. It is absolutely phenomenal. So, yeah, I think this is probably an A tier, honestly. I might put it higher in A tier if it wasn't for the whole like resurrection thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the line they had like a different ability just for demonic or something, just so that it wasn't useless, you know?
Yeah, they do need to fix that, unfortunately. It's
Yeah.
just a part of the process where it kind of got looked over, I think. But yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I haven't used it much. I will try to use it in my demonic run. I think if I can squeeze one in with all of the shenanigans that I'm trying to do. But it's definitely a class that I would love to give more love. So I'll defer to you on this one, wherever you want to put it.
Okay. I think the overall utility of it just puts it squarely in the middle of A. Maybe not above Reaper, but right behind it. Like, there's just so much that you can do, and it's got all of its bases covered, like you were saying, with the basic attacks and then the abilities and everything. So, yeah, I like it a lot, for sure. Okay. We really should have swapped these because I have not used our water cleric here much, but so is it Tidecaller is the first one, right?
Waveseer.
Waveseer is the first one. Okay. This is definitely one of the best healing classes in the game, right? Like, just bar none. The ability to heal two people at a time, the ability to like get some fun shenanigans going on with mastery. It's not an attacking class from what I remember of looking at the growths and everything. It's not the best in terms of that, but it doesn't need to be. You can do some chip damage at range. You can keep your allies supported. You can keep buffing them. So it is definitely very nice for that. I think it's probably the closest thing in the game to just like a dedicated cleric. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, because I know in our discussions you've talked about how you don't really do a whole lot of like shenanigans with healing. You rather just like murder the enemy, which is fair and based.
Yeah.
But as someone who does really like that kind of gameplay loop of like slowly pushing forward and healing, I do really like the class. So I would say it's probably a pretty solid healer just in high B, but you tell me. You probably have more experience with it than I do.
Yeah, I kept a Waveseer in my team from the minute we had them available, which
Okay.
is when I got Howrand, because obviously my Cassandra went into Ritualist, which
Yep.
I'll talk about next. I'm very excited for that. But
Oh yeah.
Howrand was my Wave Seer, and the amount of healing that they can do, given the Aquatic Affinity class skill that reduces mana costs by 30%,
Yeah.
is absurd. In addition to that, I kept him along because the Whirlpool was pretty clutch in a couple instances. Like a 3x3
I was
Whirlpool
wondering.
that just says, yeah, Chapter 10 is one that comes to mind, right? Because if you have a Wave Seer there's like a point in Chapter 10 where like half the map rushes down the middle right at you, and you kind of wish you can go, hey, hold, stop. And what Wave Seer can do is it has that Whirlpool that you can increase the range that it can target, so the distance that it has, but also you can increase the duration of it by 1. And so if you really need that panic button, you can pause for 2 turns and the enemies can't move. Then you just mow them down at your leisure.
Right.
And
right.
3x3 is a pretty large block. It's not a small block. So I like Wave Seer, and then just to have the utility of being able to heal if you need it. This is our best utility class. Now, is it a standout tier 2 class? Maybe. The best thing about it is the mana cost reduction. And that's what I will argue boosts it up to an A tier class, I think, because the mana cost reduction, regardless of what class you go into next, like say you're an elementalist and you don't care about Ice Shield and you don't care about Flame Strike and all you want to do is spam Spirit Bomb, well, maybe you side grade into Wave Seer for the mana cost reduction and then you go into Spirit Keeper for the Spirit Bomb, right? You lose out a little bit on the power increase after ability use, but if all you really care about is the ability use itself, that's all you need, Wave Seer and a Spirit Keeper, right? So the mana cost reduction is extremely strong, especially when you factor in what it goes into after this. I think this ability is really, really good.
And I don't have the reference in front of me, but I might just be misremembering it. It doesn't just reduce the mana cost of like your water-based abilities. It's everything.
It's everything by a flat 30%.
Okay. I had that very different in my head. That is, just from a efficiency standpoint, that's a huge boon. So,
like even if you want to go into like Hemomancer and create Simulacrum from the enemies, right? Which is kind of like your like you can do that.
Yeah.
So Aquatic Affinity is just really good. It's one of the best abilities in the game.
Yeah, honestly, just based off of that, I think this goes pretty high in A tier just because it enables so much shenanigans. So
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, absolutely. I did not realize that was the case there. So fair enough. Now, I believe I haven't seen it myself, but you had our next candidate here as a Hunter x Hunter reference. Is that correct?
Oh boy, if you have not watched Hunter x Hunter, we are going to have to fix that.
Okay. I mean, I know it's very good. I've had it recommended.
Oh
to me
my
heavily,
god, it is
but-
the greatest anime of all time.
Oh wow. Okay. I mean, we might have to have some words on that one, but I haven't seen it, so I can't say.
You'll see.
okay.
Watch it and you'll see.
Okay.
I will die on that hill multiple
right.
times.
Oh, I mean, FMA and AOT are looking at you side-eye, but that is a discussion for a very different video.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this one is Tidecaller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Again, I've barely used this class, so honestly, if you just want to give us the rundown, because I don't even remember what the abilities are.
Yeah, so this class is your dancer. There's no other
Right.
dancer in the game.
Right, I forgot. Yes, you are correct. Go ahead.
It has Restoring Waters, which refreshes an ally's turn,
Yeah.
and what you can do with Tidecallers is you can refresh your refresher. You can dance your dancer.
The classic, gotta love dancing a dancer. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like Rising Tides, its ability increases mastery by 4 until the end of the mission with each ability use, which is nice because, your heals will do more damage, but do more healing. Sorry, not damage. That would be interesting. But most of the time you're not making use of that. You're just using Restoring Waters because you want to refresh what you want to refresh.
Yeah.
And going from Wave Seer into Tidecaller, the cost of that 80 mana Restoring Waters is reduced. And further to that, you can increase the range that Restoring Waters can target up to 3 spaces away. Now, there's also a ring that increases the distance. It doubles the distance of ranged skills. So you are able to refresh from 5 tiles away with this class just by using that ring.
Nuts. Absolutely nuts.
The Farseer ring, it is. It doubles the effect and distance of size abilities. So 1 to 5 range dance that gets discounted to 56 mana because you've got Aquatic Affinity and then you put it next to a lore master that gives you another 15% discount. I mean,
I mean, yeah,
if there was ever a class that I would consider also putting into the Ascendant tier, it was this one.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that. As Fire Emblem veterans, we know the power of dancers. Dancers are a staple of the series for a reason. And having what is essentially a dancer that can also do other stuff, that can also dance from a very significant range, gives you so much combat versatility and just essentially functions as another copy of one of your best units, right? Like,
Yeah.
So that's power, man. Like that is power incarnate. So if you want to put it in Ascendant tier, I will defer to you based on the fact that I haven't used it, but also it's a dancer, and we all know how cracked dancers are. So
yeah, it's either at the very top of S or Ascendant tier, honestly, and I would just put it in Ascendant tier for ease, because once you get this, like, again, you're boosting it lets you do the one-turn combo of Divine Flow plus Charged Key plus phasing a unit all the way in. Like, you're opening with that turn one, you've got someone with Divine Flow, Charged Key, you're right next to your Lore Master, which phases your Ascendant all the way into the middle of combat, and you're done.
Yep. Game over, man. Game over.
Yeah. You've done your opening, you're invincible, you've cracked the map open, and then if you need, you can save that unit from whatever swath of enemies they're in the middle of and do a severe amount of damage. It is just, this creates the perfect combo mix. And even if you don't do that, like you said, it's just another turn of your most powerful unit.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, pretty easy pick for me. And now, of course, that was supposed to be my coverage, but I wasn't super familiar with it. That said, I'm not about to take this one from you, sir.
No, you can't.
Go off, Chief. Pop off,
the
King.
The Ritualist is my favorite class in the entire game. And honestly, part of that is because I played the demo and I was looking at the classes and I was using Cassandra and I was like, that is possibly one of the cutest sprites I've ever seen.
Yep.
Look at her. She looks beautiful.
Absolutely.
She's the cutest thing ever. And the biggest criminality of all of the sprites afterwards is that I have to lose this. I am going to lobby for them to let me have a skin of this sprite.
We need sprite transmog in the house right now.
Literally sprite transmogs. That's what we need. But real talk, the Ritualist, if this were deity difficulty only for this tier list, would be in the Ascendant tier. It is borderline unkillable.
Oh yeah.
And it will mow down enemies at a crazy rate. Now, I have been running this build back on Demonic, and it is not as effective simply because enemies on Demonic are far more tanky, and the Ritualist class itself does not have a great speed growth. It's only 15%. It gets a little bit of a bump at Hemomancer, but it's not enough to get you into those high speed tiers that are going to consistently double.
Yeah.
It is extremely unfortunate because you are reliant on that doubling to proc the Blood Mage ability. And what Blood Mage does is it heals attacks equal to the enemy bleed stacks. And you heal based on the number of times you hit the enemy. So every hit will heal. So if you've got 9 bleed stacks, you're hitting twice, that's 18 damage healed per combat. You need that. If you're only healing 9, the defenses are paper thin, you're not going to solo sustain as well on Demonic. Now, having said that, my Cassandra is still doing a lot of work on Demonic. A lot of work. Like, she's gotten some MVPs on a couple of maps. Like, this class is legit.
Oh, yeah.
It's not as dominating, so it's not Ascendant tier, but I still think it's pretty much S tier because Transfusion is kind of like Chain Lightning. So you're not just only getting it for yourself. You're able to proc those bleeds off of some of your other units attacking, and that makes a big difference when you're chipping down enemies. Hex, I don't really use. I only really use Transfusion with Ritualist, but the other drawback, sadly, for this class, just as a class, is that if you're using anyone aside from Cassandra in this class, they don't do as well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And so I can see the argument for Ritualist being knocked out of S tier only for Demonic. So I personally, and this is my own bias coming into play, but if we're saying Ascendant for Deity and A tier for Demonic, maybe, I would want to put this one in S tier. But I will let you talk me down from that.
I mean, I have no need to. I have no need to at all. Like I was saying before, Dreadnought mixed with Necromancer is kind of like the perfect representation of my favorite D&D character I've ever played. You add Hemomancer and Ritualist into that, and that is literally just my Goliath Necromancer Barbarian cross class slag who would just drain tank everything and be incredibly bulky in the process. And having a part of that mix in Ritualist with such a cool design too, like, yes, I'm the Blood Mage, like kind of like crazy cult assassin sort of look going on, but like with the elegance of throwing the blood around and everything, being able to do so much damage with Lacerate, like, yeah, man, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's one of the strongest, if not the strongest, tier 2 class. Even on Demonic, I would say. Everything's effectiveness just gets dropped on Demonic a bit. I think it is absolutely up there. I'd say slightly lower than Monk just because, being able to raise your advanced stats with Key is insane. But if you want it to be absolute top of S, I could do that too. But
No, I was actually going to put it on the lower end of S.
Really?
Because you have to think about consistency, right? And I'm trying to be a realist here. I'm trying not to be as biased, but like your Scholar is always going to be valuable in phasing. Your Aegis is always going to be able to do Reflector Shield and tanking and stuff like that. Your Cosmician and your Geomancer are going to be having consistent outputs. Your other tier 3 classes are always very good. And then your Monk is just better. Like my Saxon is more... The thing that Ritualist has going for it is its 1-2 range, right? So you're able to safely play your phase, which is nice. So that's maybe why you could argue it up. And it's also magical. So you're hitting those physical enemies for much harder to argue it up a little bit. But they're so buffed and the stats are so high that it's just not as dominant as it was on Deity. On Deity, I would just warp my Ritualist into the middle of nowhere and they survive.
insane.
They just do.
Yeah.
But the lack of speed here and the lack of defenses does hurt. It does hurt. And the daggers are also on the lower might, or the lower might power spectrum of the weapon tree. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, unfortunately. But I have to be realistic and objective when we're talking about a tier list. And it is, while it is still very dominant in Demonic, it's not as dominant as Deity. And so I think it's on the lower end of S tier.
Okay. All right. I'm happy to put it there. Absolutely. Because I do agree. Absolutely. So now Hemomancer, though.
Yeah, Hemomancer is actually not a great class.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, like when I looked at the upgrade from Ritualist to Hemomancer, I was like, this is much less influential than Ritualist was. Like, I never used Soul Tear, and I rarely ever used Mana Simulacrum. Dark Magic is nice for a little bit of extra power and crit, but Hemomancer and Ritualist with their daggers, with their dex growth, with their luck growth are going to be critting like 80 to 90% of the time if you build them right, regardless. So they don't really need that extra power and crit, and by virtue of them being magic, they're doing a lot more damage on the regular than anything else. So at one point, I had considered switching out of Hemomancer, but what am I switching out to? None of the options are great, and we had talked about sort of the Ritualist Dreadnought combo, but that absolutely nukes your speed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Like, Hemomancer's definitely not an S tier class, if I'm going to be honest with you. The only reason it would be is to keep that 1-2 range going. But you can do that with Spirit Keeper, albeit at less stats. So it's kind of a different... I don't know. What do you think here?
I like the idea of being able to do the drain tank thing, but then also have the option of Spirit Bomb, just for combat versatility. I think that is nice. It feels like it's really the only way that you would want to go, because, like, you're not going to start dancing, and you definitely want the 1-2 range so you can do the drain tank thing more efficiently. So unless you're trying to get that cool Dreadnought build we were talking about online, that's not what you're going for here. So I would say you could probably make Spirit Keeper work on Deity.
Hemomancer.
Or no. If you went to Spirit Keeper. On Deity, because then you at least can use Resurrection. If something happens with that ability, then maybe even more so. But for Hemomancer, unless you're really relying on the extra bodies on the field with the Simulacrum, I'd rather just have the versatility of Spirit Keeper, honestly.
I think the only thing going for Hemomancer over any of the other ones is it's a continuation of the pretty solid offensive growth and luck that you get in Ritualist, because that crit and that damage and that speed is so important. I think that's the only reason you lose that in every other class, except maybe Tidecaller, but we're not going to be dancing, let's be real.
Yeah, definitely. But even then, like, you've gotten the majority of your stats by the time you're going to be promoting anyway. So I don't know if it would be that big of a negative. And then, you know, you're getting some extra synergy with your attacks and your ability usage in Spirit Keeper. So, like, that might be the way to go. It might be.
Maybe. I'll have to test it on Demonic and see what it ends up being. I'm committed to this, so we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. That said, though, where do you think you would want to put Hemomancer then?
It's not an S tier.
No,
it's
no.
like maybe at the bottom of A or somewhere in the middle of A. Like, it doesn't really add much outside of growths and stats, which is sad. The dark magic ability is nice, but it's not always like you're going to be taking a significant amount of damage in Hemomancer, so you will get that power and crit added on for sure. But again, it's like 1 for every 5 missing, so it's like what, extra 10 at best. And you'll have the HP pool to utilize it for sure, but it's not as consistent. So yeah, I would put it somewhere in A.
I think that works because just the utility of being able to put the Simulacrum on the board if you need those extra bodies, much like Necromancer, is definitely nice. It could be very handy. But yeah, it's not doing anything for the base build that you're going into with Ritualist. So I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. And that is every class that you can play in Dark Deity 2. And it only took us 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Honestly, the classes video that we did was almost the character ranking video was almost a similar length. I'm surprised I expected this to go longer.
I think there's a lot more that you can talk about with the characters in a lot of ways, just because of the different ways you can take them and all that type of stuff. How do you feel about our final ranking here? Is there anything that your soul is passionately burning? You must insist that something gets moved.
I think we've honestly got kind of a nice bell-shaped curve going on. Like, this is the similar even distribution that I usually like to see in my tier list. So no, honestly, like our S tier and our B tier are pretty similar. The A tier is the largest one. It's kind of like the middle of the pack. The C and the D are the lower end ones, and we've got a couple like really, really strong ascendant ones. I think we've made a pretty decent list. Having said that, this is probably going to age relatively poorly as people discover things and maybe balance patches come into play, but I'm pretty happy with what we've done. What do you think?
I really like it for a first pass on figuring things out. Like, just having this discussion alone kind of opened my eyes to a lot of the biases or misconceptions that I had, but while also being like, yeah, this like Relic Knight thing that I figured out is fucking boss. Like,
Absolutely.
So I very much enjoyed it, and I think we've got a pretty good initial handle on where everything falls. I'm sure there's going to be some interesting comments about where people think things should or should not be, and of course, I always welcome that. It's always a good time to see some different perspectives, and yeah, have people suggest things that they figured out that one of us hasn't. So I think it's going to be a good discussion. There's a lot of life in this game for sure. There's so many different things that you can do. So we will revisit this once we've both finished Demonic. I think that'll be a very interesting discussion then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for having me on. This was very fun, and likewise, it was extremely enlightening, and I hope people enjoyed it.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Let us know your thoughts, both on our class video here and on the characters video over on Link King's channel, of course. I will have the link to that in the description of this one. Give him a sub. Check him out if you haven't already. Absolutely phenomenal guy. Very much enjoyed working with you, and I'm looking forward to working on a lot more stuff together in the future as well.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the kind words. That's so nice of you.
Yeah, of course, of course. For now, I think we are going to wrap this one up here because my body, it aches. For now, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a very good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everyone. And remember, be good to each other, y'all. Bye now.